Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto trained under Ginshin? Naruto times Ino, Power, Harem and Destiny, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. With a monstrous howl the Kyuubi made a rush towards the village to destroy it. Rushing swiftly the beast charged, his claws digging across the ground. That was until a series of earthen spikes burst from the ground piercing through its rib cage. The demonic king let loose a bestial howl as the pain passed through its body for a moment. Following this a man dropped onto the top of the beast's head, slamming his two-handed sword into the beast's head as he began to rush forward. Reaching the end of the back he hefted his sword up, flinging the demonic blood from the blade. The beast is disabled. Minato, are you sure this is the only way to deal with it? There is no time for regret. Then again, this is why you are the Hokage, stated a man with wild untamed silver hair, 9 swords resting on his body, wearing a long coat with a fur trim. Bearing the clan seal of Jinkitsu on his back, this was none other than Jinkitsu Hagane, formerly known as the head ninja of Yamagakure, or more precisely, the Yamakage. Yes, tell Ginshin I'm sorry I couldn't teach him more. But I am entrusting him with the most important mission, being a father figure to my son. The Jinkitsu clan has always been there for Konoha. And tell Kauden to take good care of Naruto. It's up to him and the Jinkitsu clan to protect my son. Kushina, she would have loved to have seen Naruto grow up. I have to take care of this now. Walking away slowly he smiled sadly as he tossed a scroll over his shoulder to the other shinobi. Days later. I have to leave the village for a while. Sarutobi. Ginshin should be alright in the meantime. But try and make sure he doesn't spend too much time at the monument. Don't need him turning out like the Hitaki kid. Oh yeah, Minato gave me this before he dealt with that beastie. It's his will. I think it would be better if you handle this. I ain't so good with this sort of thing. The silver-haired man quietly explained as he handed the scroll in question over to the older man, who sadly had to come out of retirement to lead the village. I see, and I understand. I can see if Uzumaki Kauden will help. I understand your desire to find the remnants of your village after Iwagakure destroyed Yamagakure. We wouldn't have won that war if it weren't for your sacrifice. I will see to it that the boy is taken care of. Just be sure to return someday. The wise Sandaime Hokage responded as he took a drag from his pipe, exhaling smoke through his nostrils. Hagane nodded his head with a wolfish smirk to his face as he turned and walked out the door, having left 3 swords behind. Give them to Minato's cub. I will definitely return when he's a genin. I wanna teach him the ways of Kenjutsu, and as a personal favor to me, find a way to put him on a team with one of his father's students as a Junin. The wolf sage smirked again as he left the office and headed on his way. Sarutobi opened up the scroll and read the first few requests that Minato left behind, and nearly choked on the smoke from his pipe in shock. This won't end well, he said with a long sigh as he saw that he named Ginshin the legal guardian of Naruto. This wouldn't end well indeed. 5 years later. Man, this is just great. Forced to cancel a date with Tenrei, because you couldn't help but give the Uchiha clan's latest prodigy a knuckle sandwich. Normally I would be proud, way of the wolf. Show one's dominance. But this is Tenrei. Ginshin seemed rather unhappy with his foster son, over something as trivial as a date being interrupted. Naruto smirked, feeling quite proud of himself, wearing his hooded long coat which bore black flames rising from the bottom over the orange fabric, the Uzumaki clan symbol at the canter of the back. Hey, he was askin' for it. When ya mess with the bull you get the horns. He proudly exclaimed, feeling mighty proud of himself. Uruka's right eye was twitching as a vein popped out of his forehead, his teeth were gritted in frustration. What is wrong with you two? The Uchiha clan head, Uchiha Fugaku, wants Naruto expelled from the academy since this is not the first or second time, but the 10th time. And you're more worried about a date than Naruto's education. What was the Yondaime Hokage thinking naming you the legal guardian of Naruto? He continued to rant while flailing his arms in frustration of the two. So how'd you punch him? Blow to the nose or jaw breaker special number 7? Queried the Jinkitsu clan heir, as he looked at Naruto with one eye open, no longer able to keep quiet about it. Jaw breaker special number 9. Naruto proudly proclaimed, pumping his fist into the air. This caused the Chunin instructor's eye to twitch again in frustration at the two. That's not being a good role model, shouted the instructor as his right eye twitched feverishly. He was in shock at how bad of a role model the Junin was. It was odd that Namikaze Minato in sound mind would have named this lunatic as a legal guardian. Point is, it would be best if Naruto had a motherly figure in his life. Not to say you're a bad parental figure. It's just he needs to know punching someone with a right hook isn't how you resolve conflict. The Chunin explained silently, as he laced his fingers, silently musing his thoughts quietly. The thought most common at the moment was what kind of insanity was rampant at the Jinkitsu compound. Don't worry about it. I have permission of the Hokage to take Naruto with me and Tenrei to where Yamagakure was. I intend to train him there. To be honest, I think he needs more attention and a special form of education, one where he isn't prone to beating up one of the more privileged kids, the ever-showboating Junin explained with one of his famous cheeky grins painted across his face. This didn't seem to put the scarred Chunin's fears to rest any more than the thought of Ginshin encouraging the boy to beat up those that challenge him. How long? Because it would be good if he became a genin with the rest of the class. Iruka explained silently as he looked across his desk at the two. He of course was hoping for an exact number, since Ginshin was prone to letting time go by. 5 or 7 years. Haven't decided yet, but I promise he will be back in time for the exam. And expect him to be surprisingly strong. Ginshin chimed with a grin on his face, which caused Iruka to go pale in the face. The thought of another Ginshin running around was coming to forefront of his thoughts. Don't worry. Have I ever made you doubt me? Don't answer that. A bead of sweat on the side of his head as he finished the last sentence. He knew there were many times he proved to be unreliable. Alright, I expect to see some improvement in Naruto's behavior when he returns. Because that's not how civilized people handle problems. This is a ninja academy, not a pirate academy. The scarred instructor quipped sarcastically. He had hoped that there would be some improvement. You got it. Trust me, he will be a more well-rounded shinobi when he comes back. You can take that one to the bank. Exclaimed the Junin as if he were almost too proud. This made the instructor even more nervous, considering Tenrei was no angel herself. A fox and wolf raising a boy containing a demon fox. This could only end in disaster. Later at the gates. Alright, do you have everything you need? That includes you, Tenrei, because you have to carry your own stuff. Ginshin commented with a smirk on his face, which was quickly erased as the blonde-haired woman grabbed hold of his ear. What was that? You're just lucky daddy likes you, because he wouldn't let me go away for a few years with just any guy, she growled as he continued to twist his ear for added emphasis. It would seem that about every woman Ginshin had come into contact with learned to do this. It could be said it was the only way to keep him in line. Okay. How about you, Naruto? He asked with a light chuckle as his girlfriend released his ear. He knew he would have to work on that in the next few years. I got my stuffed aminals, my case of Wamoon, and I'm ready to go. The blonde said with a cheerful smile on his face. He came to think of Ginshin as a big brother if not a father. Though big brother was a more accurate assumption, He was too much like a brother or a buddy. He couldn't be a ever-present being of fear for the boy. He wanted to make sure the boy grew up to be somewhat normal, unlike the Uchiha or Hyuga who always seemed to have a branch up their asses. And you said goodbye to all your little girlfriends, right? He queried with a grin on his face. Naruto didn't find it to be very funny and stuck his tongue out at Ginshin. Yes. I said goodbye to my friends. The blonde replied as he crossed his arms over his chest. This only caused the two adults to snicker at the boy's behavior. The trio then set off heading to Yamagakure's ruins, which would serve as a way to train the boy more effectively. 7 years come to pass. A group of travelers reach the gate. The most easily identified was Ginshin wearing his canonical hat, but now having adapted to the Jinkitsu style of clothing, a sleeveless long coat which was black and white, camouflage jeans, wooden sandals, and for some reason no shirt. It would forever be a mystery as to why the shinobi had boycotted shirts. He just refused to wear them. Next to be identified would be Tenrei, who had matured much in 7 years. She seemed much more womanly now. She wore a black denim skirt, a black denim jacket which had a fur trim, her hite tied around her arm, and she wore a tight white t-shirt. And what's more, she was carrying a young child which appeared to be asleep. Naruto on the other hand had grown up in the 7 years. He was much taller than when he was the trouble-making half-pint. He wore a black long coat which featured orange flames rising from the bottom, the Uzumaki spiral symbol at the center of the back. The sleeves had for the most part been ripped off. Like Ginshin, he was a fan of wooden sandals, in the fact one could do a touch more damage with them, Arctic camouflage cargo pants, and a black muscle shirt. Good to be back. Hope rich boy hasn't gotten too used to being number one. He commented with a grin on his face as he let the golden mane of hair flow behind him as he walked. Hey. Well, go find something to do. I gotta go talk to the Hokage. And no starting fights, brat. The silver-haired man warned the boy with a serious look on his face. Fiend. Can I get something to eat at least? I'm starving. Naruto exclaimed as he held his stomach in mock pain, causing another child that was with the group to giggle. Nisan is funny. The little girl with silver hair and brown eyes chimed as she giggled at Naruto's antics. Alright, take Ginshio with you, she will make sure you behave yourself. The Junin instructed the boy, as he handed over some money for the two to get something to eat. He knew that Blonde would behave himself more if his sister was tagging along. With that said, the group separated. Naruto left with his kid sister and Ginshin and rest heading for the Hokage Tower. Nisan, can we get ice cream? The little girl asked with a cheerful grin on her face, before she used her more powerful weapon, the sad puppy eyes. This caused the blonde's eye to twitch. He wanted to get a burger, but he would indulge Ginshio's desire for ice cream since he didn't want any trouble. At the Hokage Tower. Yo, old man, look what I brought back, an old hag. Cheekily, the Kinzokuden master said before he received a powerful flick to the back of the head, knocking him to the floor. He groaned as he collected himself from the floor, rubbing the back of his head. How many times do I have to tell you to stop calling me an old hag? A woman with blonde hair shouted as she walked into the room. Sarutobi was at a loss for words seeing his student who left the village before him. I'm only here because the pigs sired a child with Shizune. And they managed to convince me that the village needed me. Otherwise I would have stuck to gambling and drinking. She explained before shooting a cold glare at Ginshin, who was rubbing the back of his head. Tsunade-sama. You should stop doing that to Jin. Ginshin, you should know not to call her the O word, that word is taboo. The dark-haired assistant to Tsunade scolded both her husband and her teacher, not pleased with the fact they still couldn't coexist. So, comedy aside, I assume Naruto is ready for the test next week. The elderly Hokage asked silently, as he looked at Ginshin, who had finally gotten up from the floor. Well, while in Yamagakure, he learned the basics that I was taught, since I never learned the basics of Konoha. He has access to all the basics that made Yamagakure a force to be reckoned with. Casually, the wolfish ninja explained, as he rubbed his chin in thought. This only left the Sandaime Hokage shocked at the thought, since he recalled that Hagane was frighteningly quick for a man his size. So, he's ready then. Now that you and Tenrei have returned to the village, you will be assigned squads after the exam, which means you two have to start taking some responsibility. I should add the exams were pushed up to tomorrow. It was suggested by the heads of a few of the clans. The elderly Sarutobi explained. This only made Ginshin and Tenrei's eyes twitch. Tenrei wasn't exactly ambitious, as she was prone to taking naps whenever she got bored. Ginshin was simply another story, as he lacked the sensibilities to follow through a majority of the time. The next day, Naruto had gotten to the academy quite early. His feet were propped up on the desk, as he leaned back feeling quite comfortable. He was busy thinking of little delusions of grandeur when he was snapped back to reality by a flick to his forehead by a girl with a long blonde braid. "What do you think you're doing in my seat? And who the heck are you?" She quickly began to berate the blonde boy with a torrent of questions as she pointed at him, rapidly shaking her silken sleeves. This of course made her noticeable bounce as she pointed each time. "I have a question for you. Do fries come with that shake?" He casually asked the girl, only to be slapped across the face. The girl was red in the face, half blushing, half furious with unquestionable anger. She was prepared to slap him again when a brunette girl with a denim jacket jumped onto the desk in front of Naruto with a smirk on her face. "Rekka, don't you know who this is? This is Uzumaki Naruto. Before he left, he regularly cleaned Sasuke's clock." Without trying, chimed the effervescent girl. This was none other than Sarutobi Sayuki, also known as Sandaime's granddaughter. "Wait, he beat up Sasuke. I'll kill him. No one touches Sasuke-kun and lives to tell about it." The girl roared angrily as she clenched her fists, ready to strike him for something he did 7 years ago. "I see you've returned, Dobi. I thought I smelled the stench of failure." Came a cold insult from the one and only prodigal asshole. This stopped the girl from making her attack, as she now entered into full swoon. "TCH, and I see you're still waiting on those testicles. Tell me how that's going for you." The blue-eyed boy responded. This only made the raven-haired boy glare angrily at Naruto, clenching his fists ready to strike at him. "That will be enough, you two. I see you learned to use your words, Naruto, which is a good change, I guess." The scarred Chunin explained silently as he stood between the two students, quickly diffusing the situation as he walked to the front of the class, waiting for the rest of the students to take their seats. Once the students were seated, Iruka sat down at his desk. "All right, as you know, today is the Genin exam. As we call your name, please step into the room for the exam and we will give you your test." "Okay, first is Aburame Ari," calmly Iruka explained to the students in the room, as he and Mizuki stepped into another room to begin the exams. Hours would pass and soon Naruto was the only one who hadn't taken the exam, yet, and to say the least, he was becoming increasingly bored. "Uzumaki Naruto, it's time." Calmly the silver-haired Chunin stated, motioning for Naruto to step into the room. The blonde did just that, walked into the room silently. "All right, Naruto. The test is to create a bunshin. Do that and you will pass," Iruka quietly explained, as he laced his fingers. Naruto laced his fingers together and flared his chakra, creating a bunshin without much trouble. "Well done. Looks like you pass, Naruto. Congratulations, it seems you learned well while you were away. Well done." The instructor congratulated Naruto and handed him his headband. Naruto smirked and slowly tied the Hite-8 around his neck. "Good to know, Iruka-sensei." Naruto quietly walked out of the room, sticking his hands in his pockets. He was quite content to have passed his exam, yet he was a bit disappointed that he couldn't use his training for the exam. He knew things that Sasuke couldn't copy and in his mind that made him more special. As he stepped into the classroom he came upon a fangirl war. For such a huge head you obviously have a small brain forehead. Naruto is a much better choice than Mr. Closetcase there. Ranted the self-appointed head of the Naruto fanclub Yamanaka Ino. This made Sakura's eye twitch when she was flicked in the forehead by her former best friend. Whatever. Naruto is crude. He has no manners and he acts like he was raised by wolves and Sasuke is able to do more than Naruto could ever dream of. Responded the pink-haired girl as she shook her fist at the platinum blonde. The colliding forces just made Naruto blanch some. It was true he gained some of his foster father's interests in females, but he didn't want to see how this ended. Ironically, the girls of the class were split into two warring camps. That will be enough. I swear if it's not Sasuke and Naruto fighting, it's you girls. I don't even want to know how a Naruto fan club was formed in one day. The instructor sternly stated as he stood in front of the class. He waited for the students to all sit down and cleared his throat. Congratulations, each and every one of you passed the exam. Tomorrow you all shall be assigned to Junin instructors to form 4-man cells. You're all free to go. He calmly finished his statement, and the students all filed out feeling a sense of accomplishment. Naruto, fight me. I want to see how it is possible for someone like you to pass the test. Seeing as you could never pay attention when you were younger, not to mention you learned under Jinkitsu Ginshin who barely managed to pass all of his tests. The raven-haired boy coldly stated, as he glared at Naruto. He slowly tied his new Hite-8 around his head slowly as he slid into a fighting stance, the other students quickly clearing the area. TCH. I guess you want to be embarrassed again, sackless wonder. Tsuruheim, hold my coat for me. Almost arrogantly the blonde announced this as he pulled his coat off and tossed it towards Sayuki, the girl he always called Tsuruheim. He then pulled his pant legs up and removed the weighted braces that were around his leg, tossing them to the side. Alright, bring it on, sissy boy. Naruto said with a smirk as Sasuke bolted forward and took a swing at Naruto, connecting with his jaw. The raven-haired boy swiftly brought his leg up into a kick, connecting with stomach. Skidding across the ground, the blonde smirked as he stood upright, and in a burst of speed he bolted forward, leaving a trail of leaves floating in the wind behind him. Naruto grabbed hold of the Uchiha and began to spin him around using the speed technique he had acquired to begin wearing the Uchiha down. Every time he took a swing, the blonde pushed the blow away. The blonde spotted his opening and thrust a palm forward. Naruto's palm connected with Sasuke's chest. The blow connected and sent the raven-haired boy towards a wall which he leaned against, as he fell to the ground. You got lucky, Dobi. I don't even know how you can move so fast, let alone the style of taijutsu you were using. Don't get used to being that skilled. I will be stronger because I'm of the Uchiha clan. The raven-haired boy announced, full of anger at his humiliation. He stood to his feet, dusting himself off, glaring all the while. Oh, those were just some of the techniques I picked up. Yamagakure was one of the greatest shinobi villages after all. Karui Hatoashi no Jutsu, and a taijutsu technique called Aranami. Force isn't the only way to defeat an opponent, sometimes ya gotta wear them down. The blonde explained as he walked towards Sayuki to get his coat. As he reached the girl, he heard some clapping and looked over his shoulder to see Uchiha Furuchi was applauding the heir of the Namikaze and Uzumaki families. Well done. I see you learned much, Naruto. I think my cousin could stand to learn that. The man calmly explained as he looked at the boy kindly. This man was much different than most of his clan. Be quiet, Furuchi. What would you know? You were born from a union outside the clan. You have no right to talk that way about me. Snapped the younger Uchiha as he stormed off. The older man frowned some as he watched Sasuke storm off. I see some things never change much, huh, Ferrucci? Tranquilly came the voice of the wolfish Junin who was resting on top of the wall. The dark-haired man nodded his head slowly, as he leaned against the wall, his black hair falling over his left eye. I just accept it. The clan was nearly wiped out that night. If only I could have done more, he peacefully explained as he looked to the ground. Guilt always surrounded the man. It was an incident that couldn't be helped. Itachi single-handedly killed a bulk of the clan, and Ferrucci was only capable of saving his aunt Makoto, the triplets, Sasuke, and his own parents. Naruto. I want you to head home. I gotta speak with Ferrucci about something. Casually, the silver-haired Junin told the boy as he sat upright on the wall. Naruto, nodding his head, walked off feeling quite happy about his victory over the biggest pain in the he ever met. Once Naruto was out of earshot and the rest of the students left the premises, Ginshin hopped off the wall and looked at the so-called shame of the Uchiha clan. He knows about the Kyuubi, doesn't he? Inquired the onyx-eyed male as he casually glanced up at the sky silently. Yeah, he found out about it when our old acquaintance Itachi tried to capture him for the Akatsuki. I put in for recommendation that you be his instructor. I won't be allowed to be his Junin sensei as I'm his legal guardian, explained the heir of the Jinkitsu clan as rubbed his chin in deep thought as he glanced up at his sensei's face, which was carved on the mountain. Are you sure you want me to be his sensei? I think Kakashi would be a much better choice, Ferrucci said as he trailed off. It was obvious the man had doubt in his own abilities, unlike most of his clan. This was only because of the nature of his existence in the clan. Nah, Kakashi tends to not be reliable as a teacher. He teaches in the Zen way, let them learn it on their own. Naruto learns better through other methods. Also, in case Itachi tries to capture Naruto again, I know you can help protect him. I know you acquired the Mangekyo Sharingan. Ginshin spoke with a more serious tone to his voice. He had been on the business end of Tsukuyomi during his encounter with Itachi. I mark of shame if you ask me, but I will do this for you. You are one of the few people I can think of as friends. And I can understand your concern. Only another Mangekyo Sharingan or one with the Narakugan can fend off that genjutsu, the dark-haired man replied as he glanced over to his longtime friend. Well, I have to go. I need to give Naruto something that I was instructed by Pop to give him when he was a genin. The wolfish man spoke as he walked away, before he began to use the same technique that Naruto used to move more swiftly. Later that night, you wanted to talk to me, Ginshin-tusen? Naruto calmly asked as he walked into a room of the Jinkitsu mansion. He wondered what this was all about for the most part, since Ginshin rarely felt the need to discuss things. Yeah, now that you're a genin, it's time I follow through with my Tusen's request. As he said this, the Junin set out 3 swords on the table. Each was held fast within their sheaths. Next he set down 2 scrolls which held on them different kanji. The first was kenjutsu, and the second was ninjutsu. What are all these for? I don't know how to use swords that well. The boy explained as he looked at the 3 blades in front of him. The katana, the Jien blade, and the third which resembled a ceremonial sword. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to master them. These are 3 blades of the 9 palaces, utilized once long ago by a warrior priest of Hai no Kuni. My father, he told me that these blades rejected him. Kyutoryu, the art of the 9 blades, the Kenjutsu scroll is the basics of that art. Think of it as a more advanced form of the Kenjutsu I taught you. He began as he began to walk around the room. He had come to think of this boy as a son almost. Well, in a way they were father and son. The other is a scroll of ninjutsu my father created and learned of during his time with the other great shinobi, including your grandfather. Kouten of Siryu, it was decided you should have these when you became a genin. It will take you time to master some of these techniques. The man finished. He wanted to offer Naruto access to either his contract with wolves, or Tenrei's contract with foxes, but he wanted to wait until Naruto was ready. You mean this scroll contains some of the most powerful jutsu known in the 5 elemental countries? Kick. A wry smirk crossed the boy's face as he said this. The thought of powerful jutsu like Ginshin's Kin Tentusama and Jin Tasuki techniques made him excited. It's easier said than done, kid. Ya gotta start off small. I suggest learning Raiju Tekken first. It is a basic technique that combines Raiden with Taijutsu. After all, Taijutsu is your strongest skill next to ninjutsu, so combine the two. Now, with all seriousness aside, he trailed off quietly as he finished his speech about the new techniques. We make party, he excitedly announced as he walked into the other room, pushing Naruto into the room which had everyone he knew there. Apparently it was a welcome back party, combined with a graduation party. You got a keg of root beer, right? Naruto cheerfully asked his foster father as he stumbled into the room, which frighteningly contained some of his fangirl faction. You betcha, responded the Junin as he pointed towards the pyramid stack of kegs of root beer. This made the boy smirk. Root beer, food, and women, now this was a party. As soon as Naruto took gauge of all that was there, the food, the girls, and the guests, not exactly in that order. He smirked, feeling quite content. He strode over to a table feeling ready to begin feasting on food. Sadly, it was true at the moment he was focusing on the food, he was hungry. Before he reached the table, he was brought down to the floor by a squealing raven-haired female with a pair of high pigtails in her hair. Naruto-kun, she chimed in cheerfully as she sat on his back, feeling triumphant of her greeting on the boy. Look at all the pretty birds, he cooed as he was essentially knocked for a lop by the bum rush he had received from the girl. The girl, whom was wearing a high-collared shirt with the Uchiha clan symbol on the back and a pair of cargo shorts, she smirked, feeling mighty proud of what she had done. She had no sense of shame, and seemingly didn't carry herself like one of the Uchiha. Mirai, how many times must I tell you it is uncouth and unladylike to tackle someone? I don't care if you have a crush on him. Quickly scolded another raven-haired girl, who had a prim and proper air about her. This was Uchiha Kako. The girl was dressed in a long black dress and a high-collared shirt like her sister. Ima, aren't you going to say hello to Naruto-kun? She quickly sassed her other sister. Through this action, Naruto could tell Kako was a bit bossy. Not that bossy was bad, bossy girls always knew what they wanted. Sup. The third girl greeted with a nod of the head. She was the tomboy of the Uchiha triplets, Uchiha Ima. She stood out from her sisters very much, with her boyish haircut that was spiked, sleeveless high-collared black shirt which bore the Uchiha fan on the back, and camouflage jeans. She could almost pass for a boy, that was if she didn't have a noticeable bust line. Oh, nothin', just your sister tackled me to the ground, the ever-cheerful blonde responded as he looked towards Ima quietly. But peace couldn't last at the party for long, not by a long shot. Just what do you think you're doing sitting on my Naruto-kun? Roared an angry platinum-haired female as her hands began twitching with bloodlust. Yamanaka Ino, the ever-merciless self-appointed leader of the Naruto fan club, took it upon herself to grab Mirai by her left pigtail, pulling the raven-haired girl off Naruto forcefully. It's a miracle he didn't get a collapsed lung. The girl with cornflower blue eyes shouted at the onyx-eyed girl. Wah! How dare you say I'm fat? I'm gonna kill you, you little anorexic bitch. Since when have you had exclusive rights to Naruto-kun? I'm going to break you in two. Mirai roared in furious anger as she clenched her fists, flinging herself towards Ino to commence a beatdown. Naruto was left speechless, a large drop of sweat on the side of his head as he saw this. He was much too young to appreciate what he was witnessing. Girls fighting, it was considered the one thing all men wanted to have happen, especially if the girls were fighting over them. Crawling away under the cover of the brawl that erupted, Naruto began to make his way towards a table where the food was. He was getting hungry, and when he got hungry he just wasn't able to focus. He was almost there to the holy land of food when two figures blocked his path, smiling nervously as he raised his gaze to see who was denying him food now. "Oh ho ho ho, what's this? Hiding from me?" began one female with her hair pulled back tightly into a high ponytail. Her bright energetic eyes beamed happily at the blonde genin. She was none other than Kasegi of the Nara clan. She was pretty much evidence that the Nara clan was plagued with strong-willed women. "You know, we're going to probably be spending more time together if I'm assigned to your team," the dark-haired girl continued with a cheeky grin on her face. This didn't make Naruto feel any more comfortable with her around. In fact, it made him even more frightened. "Ray, stop trying to scare him. No wonder Shikamaru says you're just like his aunt," interjected the other girl, Akamichi Tanbo. Oddly enough, she wasn't what one expected from a female of the Akamichi clan. She wasn't on the big side. In fact, she was quite the opposite. She wasn't thin either. In fact, she had a healthy physique. It could be suggested she stored her calories where females need them most. Hint, hint. Her sandy brown hair came to her shoulders, albeit it was covered by the bandana-style Hite 8. "No. He said that I was going to be the bane of some unfortunate man's existence. Don't know why he would say something like that. Do I really come across as being that troublesome, Naru-kun?" The kunoichi of the dark brown hair asked as she looked to where Naruto was, only to discover that he was no longer there. In fact, he had replaced himself with someone else, someone who was far more annoyed with her. The annoyed individual was her cousin, Shikamaru, who had a rather unhappy look on his face as he raised his right eyebrow. He then grabbed his leading annoyance at the moment by her collar and began to drag her. "Okay, now that you're done harassing Naruto, it's time to go. I would rather be home than at one of Ginshin's notorious parties," he said with mild irritation to his voice as he dragged the girl he considered a sign of the end times out of the house. Needless to say, all the evening, Naruto was accosted by his fan club and somehow escaped when they began arguing. Needless to say, an interesting life was ahead of the young boy. There was no telling what would come his way next. The next morning, silence. It was almost too quiet in the house, and that was never good. The sunlight was breaking through the window as dawn was coming, but the silence was broken by a small giggle followed by light footsteps that came faster and faster. "Oni-chan. Good morning," came a sudden shout from the energetic Ginchio as she flew through the air. The culmination of this flight planted her knees into her brother's stomach. "Gah! The pain!" Naruto shouted out in agony, breaking the silence of the morning. Sipping on his coffee, Ginshin was hardly fazed by the sound of the painful awakening his foster son suffered. He seemed to enjoy hearing it, but not in a sadistic manner, just like it was comforting to have. "Jin, I really think we need to teach Ginchio not to do that. Now that we have neighbors, I don't think they will like hearing that every morning. I don't want our neighbors saying, 'Yeah, that's where those people live.' Then we will be asked to leave the village." Shizune began as she was starting to freak out and overreact to the behavior of their daughter. She tended to worry about things too much, but her husband didn't worry at all about stuff. He figured it was all just the natural course of things, that, and the fact he thought it gave his daughter character. "How do you know they aren't already saying that? It's pretty odd for a guy to have two wives. But it's an upgrade from what they used to think about me. I used to be referred to as Jin the Manwhore. And don't worry your pretty head about it. I'll find ways to break her of that habit. Trust me. Have I ever let you down before?" As he finished this sentence, he came to realize one time he let her down, and began to dread having said that sentence. Laughing nervously, he rubbed the back of his head. "Don't answer that," is all he could say. Jin Tusen, This is your fault, exclaimed Naruto as he walked into the kitchen where Ginshin and Shizune were. He then pointed to Ginchio, who was smiling quite proudly of her previous actions. I don't have to be up for 5 hours and this devil in the flesh of a girl planted her knees in my stomach. That's the third time that's been told to me. I wonder why. The silver-haired Junin queried as he rubbed his chin, though in his defense this was the first time it was told to him outside of child delivery. Jin, that's what most women say when delivery a baby because it is your fault after all. Tenrei coldly stated as she walked into the room, her blonde hair a complete mess. From behind her bangs a demonic glare came. This caused her husband to double over in pain from the sheer force of the glare. Now, I'm going back to bed, keep Ginchio quiet, and give Naruto some breakfast, and no. You cannot give him ramen cooked with beer. That said, the blonde woman stormed off, heading back to bed to get some more sleep. The literally ugly truth was that Jinkitsu Hananose Tenrei was not a morning person. Well, you heard that, nag. What would you like for? Whoa. The wolfish shinobi suddenly yelped in shock as a kendo shinai was thrown in his direction. I heard that, she shouted in furious anger. This could be considered an average morning for this unusual household, and every morning Ginshin thanked the powers that be that he wasn't married to Shinka, because frankly she made Tenrei look like she loved to get up early. Later that morning, at the academy, Naruto strolled into the room, casual fingers laced behind his head as he walked to an unoccupied seat in one of the back rows. He had been fortunate, as it seemed that the war of the fan clubs had come to a ceasefire after a few members of the Sasuke faction defected. HMPH, I see you haven't got the nerve to notice me, Naruto. Coldly a voice came from behind. The blonde didn't even crane his head to look as he stretched his arms. The voice came from a dark-eyed girl. Her white hair was held back in a loose bun, her face covered up by a black mask. To be frank, she was a spitting image of a certain other white-haired ninja when he was younger. This was due to the fact she was a member of the Hatake clan. She was none other than Hatake Seika. Are you listening to me? She asked as her brow furrowed in frustration at the fact he was seemingly to ignore her. Ah, Naru-chan is sleeping, chimed a cheerful girl wearing a gothic Lolita-style dress, her purple hair held up in a loose ponytail. She smirked as she peered at him intently. Mitarashi Goma, the much younger sister to a certain exam proctor, one would have to make the guess that their parents were rather obsessive with Dango, to be blunt. Typical. I try to talk to him and he won't listen to me, exclaimed Seika as she glared at the boy whom irritated her so much at the moment. Seika, you might want to gripe and complain about the womanizer in training later. It's almost time for them to announce squad assignments, interrupted another girl, wearing a former-fitting sundress, her long wavy tresses falling elegantly over her shoulders as she pointed down towards the front of the classroom. She then walked towards Goma and grabbed her by the collar of her dress, pulling her away from Naruto before she could start to cuddle him. The niece to the Genjutsu mistress, Yuahi Kuranai, this was Yuahi Sumair. Thanks, Sumair. The heiress to the Hatake family said softly as she walked away quietly. She struck the whisker-marked boy across the back of the head, first waking him up from his nap in the process. You know there are more polite ways to wake me up, Seika. The boy groaned as he rubbed the back of his head. He was not pleased with the strike to the back of his head. In fact, he was very unhappy since he was having the most pleasant dream ever. He then shifted his eyes to the right, and then to the left, and he hung his head in sorrow. The president and vice president of his fan club were sitting next to him. Somehow they saw their opening when the other three girls left to move in and sit next to him. All right, everyone please sit down and we will begin squad assignments, exclaimed Iruka as he stood at the front of the room holding a clipboard. Once everyone had quieted down, he cleared his throat and began to read off the list. Squad 1 shall be comprised of Uchiha Kako, Aburame Ari, and Heika Junko, with Hyuga Kika as the Junin. As the instructor announced this, there were 2 nods from the class, and 1 crestfallen sigh. Kako, the most feminine of the Uchiha triplet, was displeased to know she wouldn't be on the same team as Naruto. Heika Junko was a bit of a brainy girl, a book-smart girl by any measure. She would perhaps be the team's genius. Aburame Ari, hidden under a hooded sweatshirt and sunglasses, she seemed to keep quiet like most of the Aburame, not really one for conversation. Squad 2 shall be composed of Uchiha Mirai, Hyuga Sukiakara, Yuahi Sumayer, with Huyoku Shinka as Junin. As the instructor announced this, there was yet another sigh, but this time it was followed by the sound of a head meeting the desk. A well-rounded team it would seem, if you didn't take into account the nature of their Junin, an accused pyromaniac Kunoichi in her youth. Sumayer stood to be the genjutsu expert of her team, seeing as her clan specialized in genjutsu. Sukiakara would probably be the tracker of the team using the gift of the Byakugan. She appeared to be a bit arrogant as an air of superiority surrounded her. She seemed to be from the main house as well, a very sharp contrast to Hinata. Lastly, Mirai, a bit of a loose cannon as far as the Uchiha went, rather strong as Naruto could testify, having been tackled to the ground by her. Squad 3 shall be composed of Harunobara, Uchiha Ima, and Iron Yu, with Jinkitsu Tenrei as Junin. As Iruka announced this, there could only be one benefit for this choice of instructor, a team meant for infiltration. It was the only logical conclusion. This was due to the fact that Tenrei was extremely feminine. Now the 2 other members of the team, Harunobara and Iron Yu, Naruto had no idea who these 2 were. He shifted his eyes about the lecture hall. He could only guess about the 2. Iron Yu, she had black hair in a long braid, and seemed to be fond on Chinese clothes. He had heard some rumors that she had a brother with giant eyebrows but never looked into it. Harunobara, on the other hand, pink hair, held in a loose ponytail, green eyes, and a curvaceous figure. She seemed to be the more gifted cousin to Sakura. Ima didn't show any visible disappointment at the fact she wasn't assigned to the same team as Naruto. She simply put wasn't likely to show any signs of affection for the boy. Truth of it was, her feelings were much more genuine than those of her sisters. Her affections were based on the bonds of friendship, rather than those of a schoolgirl crush that her sisters often exhibited. Squad 5 shall be composed of Nara Kasegi, Akamichi Tanbo, and Mitarashi Goma, with Jinkitsu Ginshin as the Junin. As this was announced, Naruto simply winced. He felt very sorry for Ginshin having to tolerate 2 pains in the and the baby sister of someone he dated, or is dating. He wasn't completely certain on the matter, to be honest, since he had no idea who Ginshin dated and was dating. He really didn't want to know. He didn't want to be involved with every girl he met, maybe a few girls, but not enough to constitute manhor status. Squad 7 shall be composed of Sakuretsu Reka, Haruno Sakura, and Uchiha Sasuke. As this was announced, there were 2 loud cheers from the 2 girls, followed by a groan of disappointment from the one raven-haired boy, as he was not pleased with the fact he would be stuck around annoying fangirls. A smirk of satisfaction crossed Naruto's face at hearing this. It was sweet, and the very fact someone he didn't like much had to suffer some was delightful. Squad 8, Hyuga Hinata, Inazuka Kiba, Aburame Shino, with Yuahi Kurenai acting as Junin. As Iruka was saying this, there was a preoccupied look on the face of one of the 3 announced. That one being Hinata. She seemed to be rather sad at the prospect of not being on the same team as Naruto. She had high hopes that she would be able to be around him again. She would have to bide her time and wait for her chance, that is if she developed the courage to talk to him. Squad 9 will be composed of Uzumaki Naruto, Sarutobi Sayuki, and Hitaki Seika, with Uchiha Furuchi as Junin. As this sentence was finished, a loud groan of displeasure was heard throughout the room. Naruto was most displeased by the fact he would have to be on a squad with Seika, who he considered the bane of his existence, for numerous reasons. The biggest reason was simply put because Seika had the tendency to be condescending. A satisfied smirk could be made from behind the fabric mask that the white-haired girl wore, since it would simply mean she could continue to give Naruto grief about his methods. Finally, Team 10 will be composed of Yamanaka Ino, Nara Shikamaru, and Akamichi Choji, with Sarutobi Asuma as Junin. As this final squad assignment was announced, there was a blood-curdling scream of anguish. It would seem that Ino was most disappointed by this decision. No, there is not justice. I should be with Naruto. The platinum blonde-haired girl screamed in anguish as began to pound the desk with her fist, throwing a tantrum. What a drag, groaned an irritated Shikamaru, rather displeased that he would be stuck with possibly one of the most annoying girls in the village. By his standards, that is to say. Where you are to meet your Junins will be posted on the wall. You are dismissed and good luck. Iruka finished as he surveyed the students one last time. He knew it would be hard to accept that these are someone else's students now. Moments later outside the academy, as the students were exiting and heading for their prospective meeting places. A loser being trained by a loser. Fitting, because you just got lucky yesterday, it won't happen next time. A sudden insult by the Uchiha clan heir came. This stopped the new Squad 9 in their tracks. Most notably was Naruto. He was growing sick of Sasuke and his pride issues. I wasn't lucky. I'm just, what's the word that I'm looking for? Oh yeah, skilled. I am much more skilled than you are. You wouldn't have survived a week training under the regiment of Yamagakure, was the reply Naruto gave before he walked smugly past Sasuke. Seemingly one of the lessons he learned in the 7 years seemed to be based on the grounds of psychological warfare. He turned and took a few steps towards Sakura, a grin on his face. I got a question for you, he said softly, with wink. It seemed almost as if he were flirting with the pink-haired Kunoichi. No, Naruto, I won't go out with you. You're a barbaric liability, the pink-haired Kunoichi responded, obviously jumping to conclusions. No, I was curious, is your cousin single? This was his question. He seemed to be ignoring the fact that Rekka was even there. This could only be considered as psychological warfare, to say the least. What? How dare he? I'm much prettier than that big-chested bimbo. The inner Sakura raged in anger. All the while numerous veins popped out of her forehead. Her hands began twitching with the desire to strangle the boy. She isn't seeing anyone, she muttered as she started to grind her teeth with animosity and hatred towards the boy. Thanks, see ya. The blonde ninja replied as he stuck his hands in the pockets of his coat and walked away. A sly grin on his face as he walked. This left the two Kunoichi on his team rather befuddled at what he had done. It made no sense. Moments later, downtown in Konoha, Seika grabbed Naruto by the ear and twisted. What the hell was that about? It made no sense. You insult Sasuke's clan, you ignore Rekka, whom I remind you, asked if fries came with that shake. And you ask Sakura if her cousin is single. And yes, Rin taught me the dreaded earlock technique. The usually serene white-haired Kunoichi was seething with anger as she kept twisting Naruto's ear. Psychological warfare. Ow, ow, ow. Let go. He shouted in agony as his arms flailed pathetically, trying to get free of Seika's grasp on his ear. Upon hearing this, the Kunoichi released the blonde, her brows furrowed in confusion. She just didn't understand him. It's simple, Seika. He played on each of their insecurities. Rekka is obviously an attention whore. Sasuke is an elitist who thinks his clan is better than those from normal families, and Sakura just needed to hear that her cousin is prettier. explained Sayuki, who had remained rather quiet during all of this. She was one of the ones who best understood Naruto and his tactics. She would know him best since the two had got into their fair amount of trouble when younger. HMPH. Same old Naruto. You just can't seem to get along with Sasuke, it seems. The dark-eyed Kunoichi replied as a smirk formed under her mask. It relieved her to know that he was essentially the same idiot she knew. I don't know why I expected you to change. You will always be the baka you are, it seems. Let's go. Unlike my cousin, our sensei will probably show up on time. She commented as grabbed Naruto by the arm and pulled him towards the direction they were heading. Later at training field number 9, the trio arrived just in the nick of time, and there stood the man who would be their instructor from this point on. Uchiha Furuichi. He was no longer clad in casual wear of the Uchiha but wearing a black flak jacket which was unzipped with a black t-shirt underneath, Arctic camouflage pants, and his hair combed back out of the way of his eyes. Welcome. It's time to administer your test, to see if you truly are ready of being a genin. I'm certain you three know the reason for this is to make sure you aren't a liability as a shinobi. Quick to the oddly tanned Uchiha explained, as he formed hand seals creating 3 kage bunshin. Your test, each of these kage bunshin will be carrying one of 3 scrolls marked with the following kanji. Moon, Sun, Storm. I want each of you to retrieve one. He explained as tightened the laces on his arm guards. He then handed each of his replicas one of the said scrolls. You also have until dusk to acquire each. I expect you each to use the talents you have acquired through years of training to get these scrolls. He finished with a serious tone to his voice as he sat down under the shade of the tree. As he took his rest on the ground, his 3 kage bunshin took flight into the surrounding forest. We have to split up, if we want to defeat them all, began Seika, taking it upon herself to act as the leader of the 3 genin. She then stopped in her issuing of commands when she saw something out of the ordinary. Naruto was lying on the ground with both eyes closed. This didn't sit well with the Kunoichi. Ahem. This isn't nap time, she exclaimed as her brow furrowed in anger. She was unsure why he was lying down in the middle of a test. Shush. I'm listening for which one is furthest away. I bet part of the test is to work as a team, so gimme a moment, will ya? He responded as he opened one eye for a moment, giving the white-haired female a rather odd look. He then closed his eyes again and began to listen to the surroundings. He then heard the one he was looking for, and swiftly hopped to his feet. Let's go, he shouted with great energy as he bolted forward, vanishing into the foliage of the green canopy. There he goes again, running off half. Will he never learn? Seika griped as she took off after the blonde. She was just certain they would end up failing the test because of the boy and his nature. She sighed in disappointment and followed after him. Hey, you might just be surprised, Seika, remarked the brunette Kunoichi as she summoned her steel staff and quickly vaulted into the forest, following swiftly after her teammates. Bounding and leaping through the sea of green, the 3 genin moved swiftly from tree to tree. Mind explaining, Naruto? We have only until dusk to do this or we go back to the academy, exclaimed the dark-eyed Kunoichi as she managed to catch up to Naruto, whom was rather confident with the mission. Well, ya see, I got this feeling. It's like he wants us to think going one-on-one is the right option. But we are to be a team, so we gotta work as one, explained the grinning genin as he pushed forward with great determination, his grin broadening as he spotted the first of the bunshin that was ahead. Slowly reaching to his side, he wrapped his fingers around the hilt of his katana and grasped it tightly, preparing to unsheath it. He then sprung from a branch, diving forward, pulling his arm back. He was preparing to strike. What are you doing? We need a plan, Naruto, yelled Seika in shock of what her teammate was attempting. When a mission is time-based, no time to think. Unless you can plan while acting, you will be left behind. A shinobi has to think on their feet, replied the heiress of the Sarutobi as she moved higher into the trees to gain the high ground, having the utmost faith in Naruto. Perhaps, she is right, Naruto may be thinking. Kakashi said that the shinobi of Yama may be rough around the edges but they get the job done, thought the white-haired Kunoichi as she moved along the same path she was going, preparing some kunai. She knew she would have to use them to distract the replication of their sensei. From above, 2 kunai struck the ground, distracting Ferrucci, whom craned his head to see where the attack came from. As he was doing this, he was forming hand seals for a jutsu, but this was interrupted when from above came the blunt end of a staff, which he narrowly managed to avoid rolling to the side and out of the way. Raiju Tekken. Naruto roared out as he thrust his right fist forth, his arm now surrounded by a current of golden electrical charges. The Junin jumped out of the way, but this was just a feint as Naruto held a hunting knife in his left hand, plunging it directly into the leg of the raven-haired Junin. With a twist of the knife, the man was brought down to his knees. Flanking from the right, Seika rushed as she sent several shuriken flying towards the Junin, whom despite being a cage bunshin still had enough strength to roll back and out of the way. As he was struggling to stand, the hard steel of a bow staff collided with his solar plexus, causing the replication to vanish into a puff of smoke. Where he was standing, a scroll marked with the character for storm dropped to the ground. 1 down, 2 to go, we can't use that tactic again, the remaining 2 will have figured out how to avoid those techniques. Especially since this one was using Sharingan, explained the masked Kunoichi as she knelt down to pick up the scroll, placing it in a pocket on her pants. Well then, we'll have to show them what an Uzumaki, a Sarutobi, and a Hatake are capable of if they work together, nay. Naruto replied as he cracked his knuckles, feeling energized to give it all he has. You got that right, Naruto-kun. Besides, it's not like we just have those techniques. Tsuruhime replied as loosened her shoulders, resting her staff on her shoulders, as she her arms around the shaft lightly. You have done well, you 3. Truth is, the scrolls were all identical, interrupted the black-haired Junin as he stepped out of the brush, quietly taking a stick of strawberry pocky out of a box. The test was really to see if you could A. think on your feet, B. work as a team, and C. utilize the skills each of you possess in harmony. Naruto, you are a varied combatant, using ninjutsu and close quarters. Seika, you excel in ranged techniques, but also I know you can use close quarters. Sayuki, you have potential to be a great mid-range combatant as you can move swiftly and strike out of nowhere with your staff. Congratulations, you 3 have passed my test. You are now full-fledged genin. He congratulated the 3 genin, actually smiling softly to them. Yes. Score! Exclaimed the blonde as he grinned broadly, ecstatic that he was now a full-fledged shinobi of the village. Don't get baka, responded Seika as she pulled her fabric mask down, glaring at the boy, an icy cold glare at that. She would work with him, but she would be damned if she would tolerate that he had. Oh yes, darling. I will be ever so careful not to be in the future. Responded Naruto with much sarcasm as he and Seika glared at each other, since it would seem old habits just die hard. Come on guys, let's try and get along. Interjected the brunette Kunoichi as she waved her hands nervously, standing between the 2. I may have more than I can handle with these 2, thought the black sheep of the Uchiha as he looked at the 3 genin. A month later. We have a new D-ranked mission for you, began the elderly Sandaime Hokage as he picked up a scroll prepared to give Team 9 another mission. No way, responded the young Jinchuriki as he slammed his hands to the floor. He just couldn't bear to do another mission of this caliber. He was tired of getting groceries, picking weeds, delivering takeout, or finding a cat. Now, Naruto, you are still genin and you have to do a required amount of missions of this level. You lack the skills needed for a mission of higher difficulty yet. explained Iruka as he was the one who got to assist the Hokage this day. I can vouch for these three. They aren't slouches when it comes to skill. A C-ranked mission would be good for them. After all, they have already finished the required missions after all, explained Ferrucci as he rubbed his temples lightly, knowing it would be less stress to just get a C higher ranking mission for his team. I do have one in mind. Iruka, would you show our guest in? Asked the patriarch of the Sarutobi clan. Iruka nodded and walked to the door and showed an elderly man in, an elderly man who looked to be piss drunk. You will escort this man back to Nami no Kuni. It is imperative that he get there safely, explained the Hokage as he took a long drag from his pipe, exhaling the smoke through his nostrils. These are the ones you can offer. They look like they could barely do anything. Especially the rebel without a cause. Hostilely the old man stated. This caused Naruto to grumble. Shortly after there was the sound of coughing and what appeared to be the word douchebag being uttered. They will be good enough. It is a simple escort mission, you can rest assured they will get you there. The Sandaime responded, not exactly pleased with how judgmental this man was. Fine, I'll be waiting at the front gate, be ready to go as soon as possible since I want to get back there as quick as possible, snapped the man before he walked out of the room. There was collective impression among the three genin about the man, and that was, he was an asshole. Okay, you three get your stuff and meet at the gate in an hour. This will be your first C-ranked mission, the Uchiha stated as he stood to his feet walking to the door. The three genin nodded and headed out to their respective homes to get ready for the mission. Because they were headed for Nami no Kuni, they didn't know what to expect, but it was gonna be a test of their skills. Naruto attached each of his swords to his belt, making sure to have the weapons his foster father wanted him to specialize in, at the ready. Tightening his headband, the blonde spun on his heel. He had to hurry before Seika gave him a hard time for being late, again. He bolted out of the house and rushing swiftly to the nearest window, he would have to use a detour to get there on time. He didn't need to be lectured yet again by Seika, he was too young to be bossed around by women, there was a time and a place, and it was called age 20 after being too careless. Leaping from roof to roof, he made great progress, before dropping down to the streets below, and making his way to the gates. He made use of the Karui Hatoashi no Jutsu, light step, to make haste to the gate. He was already late, he didn't want to be considered the guy who is always late. The village already had one that was more than enough. Naruto was well on his way towards the gates, and skidded to a stop hopping on one foot, because he saw Rekka, he knew he would win her heart yet. He decided to try to get her to recognize the fact that Sasuke was hardly even close to having his swagger. Hey, Rekka, this is your last chance to see a real man, because I'm off on a mission, a C-ranked mission, he explained with a smirk. Rolling her eyes, she looked at the boy who acted a bit too macho for her tastes, she then sarcastically remarked, sure, let me know if you see one. Because the only real one I know is Sasuke-kun. HMPH, whatever, you are a joke as a shinobi Naruto. I don't need a high-ranked mission to prove how strong I am, remarked the Uchiha as he was leaning against the wall. Spoken like a true failure, who will rely on his Kekkei Genkei, I am the true future, and one day my face will be on that mountain. You are just so upset because you couldn't best me a few weeks ago, because I am simply too fast for you to keep up with. In short, be jealous. Bolstered the orange-clad boy as he quickly whipped his head to right with a smirk on his face. Naruto then smirked with a great amount of boastfulness and walked on towards the gates. He decided to try and be a bit more like Ginshin, only a touch more modest. Rekka found herself blushing a bit, she was starting to see the blonde in a new light, the pure ego he had, it surely had to be backed up by something. Also, it didn't hurt that he actually noticed her as a girl, unlike the Uchiha heir. At the village gates, I hope you didn't forget your mini fridge baka. We're going on a mission, not a picnic. Seika quickly began to criticize the blonde. She was definitely an equivalent of her cousin when he was her age. She would possibly grow out of this habit, but there was no guarantee. I got something for you, I hope you like it. Snapped the boy as he quickly flipped off the white-haired kunoichi. Saying these two didn't get along was inaccurate at best. In fact, it was more of differing opinions that made them fight. Quickly stepping in between the bickering duo was Sayuki, waving her hands at the two, a large bead of sweat rolling down the side of her head. Now you two stop fighting. We're a team, we should act like it. She spoke with panic to her voice. She didn't quite get why her grandfather put Naruto and Seika on the same squad if they couldn't get along. Keep it up, you two, and people will think you're dating. Ferrucci spoke as he pushed his elbows against the wall he was leaning against, forcing himself forward so he could walk past the two. He chuckled softly since he knew one rumor that was circulating involving Ginshin and Kurenai, saying enthusiastically with a grin, after all, people think Ginshin and Kurenai are dating. Given all the times she slaps him or punches him in the gut. I just thought that happened because Ginshin Tusen likes to refer to himself as the Sennin of, the Guru of Greatness, the Messiah of Machismo. He also claims to be the every night delight. The blonde explained as scratched his head. He then realized what Ferrucci said. His right eye began to twitch. He then looked at Seika and back at Ferrucci and exclaimed furiously, "You must be out of your mind to think I would like this ice queen. Like you're any catch womanizer in training." Quickly the masked girl responded as she stepped towards the blonde and looked him dead in the eye. "You sure these kids will be able to keep me safe? Those two seem to hardly be able to stop arguing," queried the bridge builder. He didn't quite feel safe with shinobi like that as guards. Glancing at Tazuna, Ferrucci ran a hand through his own hair. He knew the concern, and reassuringly said, "Trust me, they can work cohesively when the time comes. They just don't see eye to eye socially." "Alright, I'm going to trust you on this, but I hope you are right," remarked the older man. "Naruto, Sayuki, you guard the flanks, Seika you bring up the rear, I will take point," quickly ordered the Junin. The three genin quickly moved to their positions and the group began to move on to their destination. A few hours down the road, as the group traveled, Ferrucci kept seeing puddles, which put him on edge. This was the perfect setting for an ambush. He could use his Sharingan, but he knew that it hadn't rained in this area for a good while, and for this many puddles to be in place didn't bode well. Raising from two puddles and ripping a bladed chain from under the road, two masked shinobi bearing the Kurigakure emblem on their Hite-8 quickly moved towards Ferrucci. In a swift action, the chain was quickly cleaved in two by Naruto's branch sword. As he spun it and held it upside down, he quickly rushed towards the one on the left. Sayuki had also moved forward and swung her metallic staff, colliding it with other shinobi's stomach. She then began thrusting and lunging the blunt end of the staff forward to strike the shinobi down. Stepping front of Tazuna, Seika reached into her kunai holster, acquiring a kunai to protect the client. As she could sense another shinobi somewhere nearby, no, she could sense more than one. Naruto's sword collided with the clawed gauntlet of the shinobi he was fighting. He quickly began to start manipulating his chakra to begin using a jutsu he had just learned. He then focused chakra to his feet to move swiftly behind his opponent. As he slipped behind his opponent, he thrust the sword into the ground as he dropped down into a crouch, waiting for the shinobi to turn to him. Slowly his body became enveloped in a yellow-tinted Raiden chakra. Quickly the shinobi turned, expecting a sword attack to his back. Lunging forward, the blonde speared the Kurigakure shinobi, releasing the charge of electricity into his opponent. "Raiju Yari, Thunder Beast Spear!" roared the blonde as he stood up. quickly spinning and dropping his elbow into the shinobi for good measure. Sayuki quickly began on her heels and the balls of her feet quickly lunging the pole of iron at the other shinobi quickly lunging the pole forward. She knew no matter how much the bobbed and weaved the pole of iron would connect, and that it did, as it struck once, twice, 3 times. Striking the right hip, the left knee, and the right elbow, she ceased her assault and shouldered her staff, and said calmly, Tetsu no aim. Rain of Iron. Tazuna, this situation is deeper than you told us. Shinobi not bandits, so what's the true story? I may consider helping you out still, but it dependent on if I like your story. Spoke Furuchi as he looked over at the bridge builder, whom was in shock over how skilled 2 of the genin were. Alright, it's true, this runs a lot deeper than what I said. What actually happened was, the bridge builder began to explain the story of how Gato, a Yakuza had come to the island village and taken control of things. And now that Tazuna had plans to build a bridge to loosen the tyrannical grip of the criminal, missing ninjas have come out of the woodwork to kill him. I see. Well, since things are this bad, I imagine we can help out, but you have to do what I say, when I say. This is the only way to ensure your safety. And one more thing, Furuchi snatched the client's liquor away and poured it out. He looked defiantly at the man as he handed the bottle back and said in the most calm yet assertive tone, you will be sober from this point on. I have a feeling we are dealing with more than simple rogue ninja and a Yakuza boss. Meanwhile in Konoha, it was fairly quiet at the Hokage Tower, was being the correct word, as suddenly bickering broke out through the building. Bickering from 2, count them, 2 Junin. Ginshin and Kurenai were once again at each other's throats, having never seen eye to eye. Get off my back already. I'm doing my best, shouted the shinobi, obviously not in the mood for criticism from her, not after he had missed lunch because of order to report to the Hokage. Your best isn't good enough. You expect my niece to learn taijutsu when she comes from a clan that specializes in genjutsu. This is unacceptable, responded the crimson-eyed Junin. He came to a dead stop, pivoting on his heel, his ragged coat spinning along with him, his golden brown eyes narrowed in anger, his mouth curling in irritation as he snapped back, it is not too much to expect that she learn how to survive. You cannot always rely on others of the squad. I know this better than anyone. I learned multiple arts to increase my chances of survival. We of Yamagakure are all strong, we have harmonized our skills. I am skilled with ninjutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, and genjutsu. Not because I have some kind of bloodline, no. I have that thing called tenacity, the drive to become better. And I expect my students to have it, as my master had for me. Now if you excuse me, the Hokage ordered me here. He then turned back towards the office walking swiftly, as he left Kurenai behind, her mouth wide open in shock at how she saw a different side to the man she had such low opinions of. As he walked into the office, a slender girl with black hair, which bore some blue streaks, stepped in front of the doorway to keep any uninvited parties out of the office. A fur coat with blue fabric, a deep azure shade draped her frame, the fur trim was a silvery white. Her hite tied firmly over her right eye as she stared calmly at Kurenai with her one good eye. Her hair was long, her bangs were evenly cut and combed over her forehead. She wore a Chinese-style top, black and silver in color, with some embroidery of dragons. A dress with slits up the sides, and a kodachi strapped to each leg, she looked to be a force to be reckoned with. That headband, you are one of the survivors of Yamagakure, remarked Kurenai, as she could practically feel the strength of this girl. It was intense, she had never seen a kunoichi who was a fighter. In her experience, kunoichi had always been genjutsu specialists, or medics. She couldn't help but wonder if she had some kind of dojutsu hidden behind her headband. Indeed, I am Kawasagi Suiran. You should not disparage Ginshin-sama so. He means the best for his students, and he is a fine example for the young. He is a tenacious one. He doesn't give up ever. The woman spoke with a serene voice, like that of a tenshi. She seemed to be at peace with all around her when she spoke. I see. Why do you show such reverence for Ginshin anyways? He's just the son of your leader. Responded the crimson-eyed Junin. She had little respect for the shinobi. She couldn't fathom how Suiren could show such admiration for the idiot. Suiren, I didn't know you were in the village. I heard Shirogane-sama had come. But I didn't expect you. Chimed the now effervescent Tenrei, no longer in the foul mood that she was in at morning. Tenrei glanced about trying to make sure someone else hadn't come too. She then said, "Don't mind Kurenai, she's just angry because Jin dumped her since she was trying to fix him. She doesn't appreciate Jin for who he is. I see Agaya isn't here, which means I won't be killed yet for being married to Ginshin. Ya know how she is, only you are allowed to be near her Onisama because you lost your eye saving him during the fall of our village." Tenrei, it's good to see you again. No, Agaya didn't come, she's training with Kankyojin-sama. It is just me and Shirogane-sama, explained the serene Kunoichi, as she ran a delicate finger over her headband knowing the price she paid to protect Ginshin. Having put two and two together, Kurenai threw her hands up and walked away. She should have guessed that Ginshin had yet another woman on the side. She didn't want to be around any longer since she found the thought to be repulsive. The very thought that Ginshin was still up to his usual behavior despite having two wives, she didn't even understand how that worked. As Kurenai left, the doors to the Hokage's office opened. First to come out was an older shinobi. He was wearing a blue fur coat akin to Suiren's, only the sleeves were still attached. He wore robes of the deepest blue, as if cut from the ocean itself, and hakama white as the clouds above. His silvery hair tied back, his stern battle-hardened gaze shifted to the right. He stroked his beard momentarily, as he was deep in thought. He then stepped, before staring at Tenrei. Tenrei slightly cringed, expecting the grumpy dragon of Yamagakure, as he was called to speak. "Welcome to the clan, Tenrei. I see the idiot has matured somewhat from becoming a parent. We will be borrowing him for a while. The Teifu needs to see Ginshin." He kindly spoke, although the tone seemed rather militaristic. He nodded respectfully as he walked past her. He shifted his gaze to the side, and sternly said, "Suiren. We will be leaving in an hour. Be sure my idiot nephew gets there on time." "Hi, Shirogane-sensei," responded the dark-haired woman. She understood it was her duty to make sure Ginshin was ready to go in an hour's time. Then came Ginshin and another man. They looked to be brothers as they were in the midst of disagreeing. "Don't screw up, Kojicho. I'm warning you, I probably won't be back in time for the Chunin exams. If you fail to teach the girls properly, I will let the rest of the village know you play with dolls," warned Ginshin as pointed his finger at his brother, poking his chest each time a sentence ended. Kojicho was slightly taller than Ginshin, wearing a camouflage cap, which had a steel plate affixed to the front, the trigram for mountain, the symbol of Yamagakure etched into it. He wore a denim jacket, a charcoal black was the color, a loose steel gray t-shirt underneath, a pair of forest camouflage cargo pants, with 10 scrolls strapped to each leg, and his ninja sandals were akin to combat boots. "I won't screw up. And for the 1000th time, their puppet's captain can't keep it in his pants." "That's right, I know all about the fact you have 2 wives because of your behavior," responded the older brother as he crossed his arms defiantly, a smug smirk on his face as he leaned back. Ginshin-sama, we have to hurry." Meekly the blue-clad Kunoichi tried to interject into the dispute between brothers. Yeah, I know, just let me finish this discussion." As he trailed off, he hefted his brother onto his back and promptly fell backwards, planting his elder brother into a desk, executing a flawless Samoan drop. He stood to his feet smirking as he dusted his hands off and calmly said, "Okay, let's go. I got everything stored into a scroll. I figured the time was coming." He walked down the hall leaving with the dark-haired Kunoichi. Meanwhile in Nami no Kuni, it had been an eventless trip since the failed ambush of the demon brothers, but the closer they got, the more it felt imposing and dangerous. Ferrucci didn't like the feeling going through his spine. He felt danger all around, killing intent, like that of a beast. "Get down," he shouted as he spun and brought the team and the client down to the ground, narrowly avoiding a large sword which flew through the air, intending to cut them in down. "Impressive. I should expect as much from one descended from Uchiha Madara," called out a voice which sounded savage as a beast. The gargantuan man descended from the canopy of the trees, wearing a mask of bandages across his face. "Mamochi Zabuza, I figured you monsters of the Kiri no Shinobigatana Nanananshu were eliminated after your coup, and never refer to me being descended of that monster again," spoke the Uchiha with great irritation as he stood to his feet, pushing his hair back as he stood. He slid back into his fighting stance, pulling a kunai to his hand. He waited for the chance. Once he saw it he sprung forward, and created two Kage Bunshin to assist in the attack. "Naruto, get Tazuna somewhere safe. There are more people nearby, I sense two, and an larger one further away, one more savage and cruel than Zabuza," he ordered the team as he swung for the nuke nin, attempting to create enough of a distraction to allow the team to get to safety. "HMPH. Pathetic," exclaimed Zabuza as he slapped away the Kage Bunshin without blinking. He stepped aside, avoiding the Uchiha's attempted strike, with the kunai jumping to the tree and retrieving his massive sword, preparing to strike from above. "Oh, you think that was my intention to wound you with a blade?" responded the raven-haired Junin as he finished forming his hand seals, a smirk crossing his lips as he formed the tiger seal, and quickly exhaled a stream of fire from his mouth which moved towards the rogue ninja. "Move, Naruto. Things are about to become more intense," roared the Junin as he began forming hand seals once more, preparing for yet another attack. "Right. Let's go," exclaimed Naruto as he and the rest of the team moved forward to get the client somewhere safe. This was going to become a dangerous place in no time. "Going somewhere? I smell new prey Nami ne. I want the blonde," spoke a voice belonging to a young girl. Her voice was slightly lower in pitch than most. Eyes that were like to orbs of gold piercing through the mist that was down the road. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Kaisui. He may be inexperienced, but he looks like he could have been trained to hide his strengths. That man from Iwagakure wants this one alive, so make sure you don't kill him," spoke the other, her voice far more gentle, but she was remaining hidden from view. "I don't care," screamed the first girl as she rushed through the fog, thrusting her Yari spear forward. Her hair was green but faded to an aquamarine shade, wearing a wetsuit, a loose cargo pants. Naruto grit his teeth as he unsheathed his Jien blade and swung it forward to parry the thrust of the spear. He had to do his best given his lack of kenjutsu training. He had to rely on the basics he was taught by Ginshin. He tossed the blade to his left hand and unsheathed the larger branch sword which rested across his back and swung it downward, intending to hook one of the prongs onto the shaft of the spear and drive it to ground to disarm the girl. As the prong of steel connected with the pole, he shoved the sword downward to the ground, pinning the weapon to the soil. He then twirled the Jien blade and planted it to the ground and swung himself forward into a drop kick, turning the move into a dropso. He landed in a crouched position as he began to focus his chakra into his right arm, and then he shouted back to the rest of the team, "Seika. You and Sayuki get the old man to safety. I'll handle this. You're insane. You're outnumbered. Your ego is getting the better of you," replied the white-haired Kunoichi as she moved to assist him, but was quickly halted by the staff of her teammate. "I don't think he's doing it for the glory, let's do what he says," responded the brown-haired Kunoichi, as she and Tazuna broke off heading in an alternate direction. Seika, understanding the situation, followed suit. Brave for a little boy, snarled the green-haired girl as she thrust her hand forward, grabbing the blonde genin by the neck and quickly snapped forward, slamming the boy downward with a side leg sweep. Naruto collided with the ground, the air knocked out of his lungs by the sudden shock of the collision. And in a moment of a basic reaction, he threw an electrically charged punch to the girl's midsection, sending her falling back, as if hit by a stun. Kaisui, be careful, he's using crushing stone style, just like that lunatic uses. The unorthodox styles of Yamagakure must have been taught to him, warned the hidden girl as she continued to watch from distance. I can see that. Damn, what the hell was that? Griped the green-haired girl as she stood to her, holding her side, a numbness coursing through her left side. Hybrid of ninjutsu and taijutsu, the user creates a localized field of Raiden chakra and sends it through his arm. An average level jutsu at best, spoke the second girl as she stepped out of the mist. She didn't appear to be much older than he was either. Ebony hair that came down to her neck, she also wore a wetsuit as a top. It was possible the two girls worked as a team like the Demon Brothers did. Her arms bound in armor with a pair of gauntlets about her hands, and a pair of loose-fitting cargo pants with two kunai holsters strapped about her legs. Her cold blue-eyed gaze fell on the boy as if she was judging him, and then in the same heartless manner, she spoke softly, saying, "Stop taking him lightly, Kaisui, he isn't that strong, more than likely a freshly promoted genin." Kaisui rolled to her feet and rushed to grab her spear. She didn't care any longer, she seemed to be bound to her love of battle now. Naruto sprung from his hands to his feet and rushed forward, and with a shoulder block he prevented the girl from getting her weapon. He had to keep the fight on a relatively even playing field. As he connected, he was struck in the torso 3 times by the dark-haired girl, which sent him skidding back. Meanwhile, the rest of the team was making its way to a safe hiding place, and to keep their client safe. As they headed down the road, they came across a young woman, black hair braided into an ornate style looking akin to butterfly wings, a black fur coat draped over her form, with a white fur trim. She wore a loose tank top, and a pair of camouflage cargo pants, with a pair of tonfa holstered at her side. She looked quite young. As a gust of wind came through, the plate on her forehead was exposed, the trigram of mountain. Go on, run and hide, it's going to become dangerous in a moment. You have to keep your client alive, she said as she walked past the group. She stopped and glanced to the side and looked at Seika and shook her head. I don't trust you. Everyone knows those from the trigram villages split into 2 factions. Very few of the Yamagakure shinobi are from Konoha. For all we know, you could be an enemy, spoke Seika as she pulled out a set of kunai, and stood in a defensive stance. I can see that, but I have no reason to. She trailed off and her eyes widened as she felt an immense chakra nearby, and it was fast approaching. She then formed a set of hand seals and created tunnel to the ground below. She then motioned to a campsite near the roadside and said, "Go over there, you will be safe for the time being. You have to stay out of the way. We have a minor genjutsu to keep others from noticing people are there." She then pulled her tonfas from the holsters and rushed into the forest. She was obviously put off by the massive chakra she was feeling, and didn't like it. As she rushed swiftly to intercept this man known as Kojiro, it could be said this wasn't your average mission any longer. Let's go. I don't know who this Kojiro guy is, but it's obvious it isn't good, Sayuki commented as she moved to the tunnel to take shelter until things settled down. Wait just a minute, Sayuki. How do you know we can trust that woman? Seika shouted as she grabbed her teammate by the arm to stop her. The brunette stopped and looked directly at her masked comrade and said, "She's a sage from Yamagakure, or at least one in training. Now let's go, because this is beyond our skill and we have to take the assistance we can get. Meanwhile, Zabuza and Ferrucci's battle raged on. The blasts of fire had finally ceased pouring down. The mountainous Nuke Nin burst from behind a tree as soon as the Uchiha had ceased his bombardment of flame, quickly creating hand seals for Suiryuden Water Release, Water Dragon Blast. Sharingan! Exclaimed the Uchiha as he activated his dojutsu. The crimson eyes pierced through as he quickly copied the jutsu and began forming the seals to counter the attack. And in a moment of synchronicity, two dragons formed entirely of water came to existence and came crashing into each other, canceling each other out. A wave of water lashed back at the two shinobi as the masses of water created a large wave of water, knocking both shinobi back. The wave of water had caused Ferrucci's hair to fall over his eye, causing him to resemble Uchiha Madara. He rushed through the water, lunging forward as he pulled a kunai into his hand, ready to strike. The assimilationists have all the strengths of Uchiha without their flaws. The ego, the dependence on Kekkei Genkai. In fact, this is the end of the road for you, demon of the mist. Roared the raven-haired shinobi as he spun into a spinning heel kick, knocking the swordsman to the ground and rolled through to strike the kunai into his back to eliminate chances of the man using his sword again. Zabuza was caught off guard, having not expected Ferrucci to come so quickly and take him down with such a fierce combo. He roared out in pain as the steel blade was planted into his back. K ha 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 ha. So serious? If you really need to hurt someone, hurt me, that's if you can, called out a voice from behind. The voice held tinges of insanity, like a lunatic. The dark-haired Junin turned around slowly to see a man with disheveled black hair, a shinobi flak vest which was unzipped, and numerous scars across his torso as he had no shirt to conceal them. Black cargo pants with numerous knives strapped to his legs. He wore an Iwagakure Hite 8 around his forehead, with a Yamagakure Hite 8 tied to his left arm, around the bicep, and numerous piercings on his face and in his ears. The man just simply held his arms out, as if to taunt the Uchiha, as if he wanted to be attacked. You're screwed, Uchiha, the guy is a real demon. Mazo Seikojiro, one of the 5 architects of Yamagure's fall. No way that gimmick eye of yours will stop him, ranted the swordsman as he tried to prop himself up. He managed to get to a seated position. Using Kubikiri Hako, he stood to his feet. Zabuza, you stay out of this, or I will be forced to snuff out your life like the weak flame of a candle it is. Kojiro said, with a disturbing smile on his face as he moved surprisingly fast and moved behind the Uchiha, ripping the kunai from Zabuza's shoulder. He twirled the blade, shaking his head in disappointment before throwing it to the ground. He then said, in a mocking tone, that isn't a blade, that shit is pitiful. He gripped the curved blades that rested at his hips, pulling them from the sheaths. He then spun and attempted to place the blade at the throat of the Uchiha. Before the blade could even reach his neck, the crimson-eyed Ferrucci shifted and spun on the ball of his foot. He then thrust his elbow into the scarred shinobi's midsection. He slipped his hand down, gripping a trench knife from the man's arsenal, and spun, slashing upward and diagonally across Kojiro's torso, causing a rain of crimson across the ground. He then spun through and landed defensively, holding the blade up, preparing to fight. Kya ha 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 ha. That tickled. But, is that all you're capable of? The freakish shinobi queried as he ran his hand across his torso. He gripped his vest, noticing it was wrecked. He pulled the vest off, tossing it to the ground. The masochistic shinobi walked forward, unsheathing a pair of serrated knives, and said in a nonchalant tone, "You bore me. If this is the best you can do, I have no further use for you." In a sudden moment, the black-clad shinobi was struck hard across the jaw with a bamboo tonfa, being knocked back. The kunoichi who had encountered the rest of the team earlier was standing between the two. She glanced back and called to Ferrucci, "Go get the boy, he's in trouble. Those girls are possibly Chunin level, he's in over his head. Now go, she ordered as she slid back in a defensive stance holding her tonfa tightly in her hands. Nodding his head he turned and ran away. He had enough time to profile the girl and analyze that she would be trusted. The Yamagakure headband, the fur coat of a senin, and the fact he remembered seeing her many years ago when she was just a child, he remembered well that she was refugee. He rushed down the road. He saw his student on the verge of being run through with a spear. He lunged forward and grabbed the and jumped back. As he raised he held his hand in a single hand seal, and spoke softly, Genjutsu, Ukami-sama no Kusari, Genjutsu, Chains of the Wolf Lord. As he said this an illusion a powerful one took place. The two girls saw a series of chains burst from the ground and coil around their limbs holding them in place. The harder the restrained, more chains would shoot out of the ground holding them in place. His Sharingan examined the chakras of the two girls, but the one with the green hair, she looked different. Her chakra felt almost feral, like that of a prowling shark. Sensei, I had them, complained Naruto as he worked to stay conscious, numerous gashes on his body, having been struck numerous times during the fight. The Kyuubi chakra was going to work quickly to heal the wounds, but this was the first real fight the boy was in. Naruto finally passed out, exhausted from the fight. Ferrucci shook his head and jumped down from the tree rushing forward and retrieving Naruto's swords. They had to hurry to safety. He would have to start training Naruto to utilize all his ability from now on. Something big was coming. He continued down the road as he carried the unconscious genin on his shoulder. His crimson eyes picked up traces of active chakra, probably a genjutsu barrier. He proceeded through and found the client and the rest of his squad safe. Sensei, what happened? Seika exclaimed in shock to see Naruto injured and unconscious. She was concerned since she never expected the boy to be injured. He was in over his head. That green-haired girl, her chakra wasn't normal, it was like the Kyuubi. Seika, get your medkit out, he needs some medical treatment. Spoke the Junin as he sat Naruto down, on the ground. They would make use of this tunnel for the moment until Naruto was awake again. Seika nodded her head, pulling her pack off her back and getting her medical kit out, quickly bandaging the boy and cleaning the wounds that hadn't healed. But in the meantime, the black-haired girl was avoiding the attacks of the masochistic shinobi. As she blocked slash after slash using her tonfa, she looked for an opening. Spotting the opening, she threw her tonfa to the side and jumped into the air, grabbing him by the head, executing a double knee face buster. This move caused his forehead to be busted open, causing him to wobble off slowly as he tried to get his bearings. Running forward, she performed a step-up enzugiri, planting her foot directly across his face, which she transitioned into the head scissor, tossing him to the ground. Where is Uehasu? We know you're working with Tetsuoni. Now tell us, she ordered as she stepped forward, as she picked up her defensive weapons. Hey, as if I'd tell ya, probably in a prison somewhere. Ya no Orochimaru would kill for the Tetsuden. But tell ya what, how about I take your eye just like I did Suiren when she tried to stop me? He ranted as he smirked as he stood back up, having donned the proverbial crimson mask. He looked ready to keep fighting. When suddenly he was bombarded with several Senbon falling back looking to have been killed. She turned to Zabuza, intending to get information from him. As she approached him, he too was hit with several Senbon. She looked about, expecting an attack on her next, when an Oinin dropped down to the ground, picking up Zabuza's body. I've been tracking down these two for the past few weeks. Zabuza had to be dealt with, but it was a bonus to get rid of an enemy agent from Iwagakure. He's killed many of our agents for the sake of getting his thrills, explained the ninja hunter as she walked towards Kojiro's body, lifting up, preparing to escape with them. If that's so, why don't you destroy his body? Queried a gruff-sounding man, who stepped out of the forest slowly. Shouldering a large kanabo, he looked to be in his late 50s, graying golden blonde hair, which was spiked in the front resembling a crown, his tattered sleeveless black fur coat whipped about in the wind, numerous bandages were wrapped about his arms, a pair of black cargo pants. I have to take proof that he is dead to the Mizukage, responded the Oinin as she prepared to leave. I call bullshit, remarked the older ninja as he quickly stepped forward swinging his studded club forward, which seemed to double in size as he poured his chakra through it. Hyoten. Hyatate, she exclaimed as she quickly formed a chain of one-handed seals creating a solitary shield of ice which halted the attack long enough for her to get away. She glanced back as she traveled through the trees shocked to see her nearly indestructible shield of ice shattered by one swing of the shinobi's club. There had to have been a reason why such brute strength could destroy her barrier. As the club finished breaking through the shield of ice, he spun through, his left arm bringing the club crashing down into the soil. He growled as he watched the Oinin escaping through the trees. He lifted the massive club and slammed the head of the club into the ground. We'll go to the campsite and get prepared to leave. The Teifu is on borrowed time, we have to get to the hermitage, he said as he shouldered his heavy club and turned walking down the road. Kinkuma-sama, what about that genin team? You can't seriously think about leaving them to fend for themselves, shouted the black-haired girl as she ran in front of her teacher looking at him in a confused manner. No, but Uchiha Furuchi isn't a slouch either. He doesn't rely on the eye like the members of the clan who died years back. I will tell him what's going on, I will do that much. But your generation needs to stand on their own feet, it's time for you to take the reins, so you can teach the new generation how to stand on their own feet. He responded as he continued down the road. It would take time too. He had a stern look on his face as he walked. He looked tired of the so-called peace that existed. It was a lie what the 5 great nations called peace. Moments later at the campsite, the gargantuan shinobi stepped through the genjutsu barrier and looked at Furuchi sternly before he sat down. He reached into his coat and threw down a couple scrolls and a book, as he pulled out a pack of gum and got a stick of gum and proceeded to chew it. Are you, Kenkyojin Kinkuma? Queried the onyx-eyed shinobi as he sat across from the giant, he asked as his face hid behind the tall collar of his shirt. I am. Look, I haven't time to waste, I have to go to a mountain to the east. You need to step up the training of your squad. No Zen method. Kojiro is alive, Zabuza is alive, they probably rescued the other girl and the Sanbi Jinchuriki too. These kids won't survive the mission, they need skills to survive, explained the gruff individual as he rubbed his stubbled chin. He had a stern look all the while, he didn't believe the genin were prepared enough for this mission. What do you mean? The last Sanbi Jinchuriki was Yagura, the Yondaime Mizukage, responded Furuchi as he looked somewhat confused by the claims that one of those kunoichi was a Jinchuriki. Actually there are 2 sets of Jinchuriki. Yin and Yang, that's how it works kid. Kinkuma responded as he leaned forward. They could speak like this since the genin were all asleep, and the client was also resting for the moment. There are 9-tailed beasts, that is all, there couldn't be another set, exclaimed the Uchiha as he furrowed his brow in frustration. Actually the second set are the Seiju, the 9 sacred beasts. They weren't masses of chakra like the Kyuubi, they were something completely different. Problem is, Naruto will be facing another Jinchuriki who has more control than he does. I'm certain, Ginshin had no choice but to tell the kid about the Kyuubi. But it doesn't change the fact Naruto cannot use it, when Ginshin doesn't even know how to use it, explained the older shinobi as he looked seriously at the smaller Junin. Are you saying Ginshin has one of these Seiju? That's not likely. He doesn't show any of the signs of a Jinchuriki, they usually have signature looks that represent their beast. Ginshin looks normal, and his chakra isn't as massive, reasoned the Uchiha as he stood to his feet unwilling to believe what was told to him. It's sealed quite well, that's why. The seal Kurogane made was made to keep the chakra sealed inside. He may never need it, but should he need it, he will be ready. You have to be careful. If Kojiro is here, the other four are involved, and someone is manipulating things here. Be careful, this mission just got harder. You have to stand on your own, I can't help you, I have to be in the Tsuchi no Kuni as soon as possible, so good luck. Agaya, we're leaving, he explained as he stood to his feet shouldering his club, his golden mane whipped behind him as started to walk forward. He and Agaya strode out of the camp taking off through the forest, using Karui Hatoashi no Jutsu to move with surprising speed. Understood. The Uchiha bowed his head respectfully to the veteran shinobi, he understood he had to prepare his squad more. In a manner that Ginshin would have done by this point, he knew they wouldn't have much time to rest after this, and decided to enjoy it while he could. Hours later, morning had arrived. Furuchi had dispelled the genjutsu and hefted his pack onto his shoulders, preparing to leave. All right team, we have to hurry to Tazuna's village, and once we are there, you will all begin your training. Because you will have to face Zabuza as if your lives depended on it, because they will. He explained as he turned to look at his squad, he saw the potential each had, and he would do his part to bring them to the level of surpassing the expectations set for them. He would make them into the best squad of Genin, a team that could easily pass the Chunin exams. As they traveled down the road, a pair of eyes watched from the shadows, eyes that were silver with a black wheel-like pattern lain over it, with a white ring at the center outlining the pupil. It begins, spoke the figure before disappearing altogether to let things play out for now. It was as if there was a puppeteer guiding the strings of fate now. Will Furuchi and his squad succeed or will they be doomed to fail? Only the upcoming battles to come will decide it. A pair of orange eyes pierced through the darkness of a room as he looked at the sorry condition Zabuza and Kojiro returned in. Pathetic. You are supposed to be two of the most feared men in the ninja world. Disabled by an Uchiha who hates his dojutsu, and busted open by a mere girl who can't be older than 23. You call yourselves shinobi, exclaimed the orange-eyed figure as he leaned forward revealing his face into the light. The streaks of crimson going down his cheeks, a red marking on his forehead, the three ponytails draped across his shoulders, the black kosode with the hook, the symbol of the Satsujin clan embroidered on the chest. If we don't stop the bridge builder, interjected Getu as he walked into the room as the dark-haired figure stared at the Yakuza with contempt. You will be quiet. Your petty little schemes are not important. The palace guardians have hidden something in this region, and Orochimaru-sama wants it. He responded, shifting his eyes to the short gangster, the whites of his eyes gradually blackening as he sent more chakra to the Narakagan. Or what? I'm not afraid of you. I have my own personal army, why should I fear a ninja who hides in the shadows? Responded Getu as he looked unafraid of the seated shinobi, feeling quite confident with his three henchmen at his side walking towards Zabuza. He looked at him with contempt. He pulled on the grip of his cane revealing a sword, he quickly placed it to the swordsman's neck as if he felt it his place to play judge. As he did this, the head of a spear was placed to his neck, as well as clawed fingers found themselves inches from his eyes, also the oinen moved behind him, holding a senbon a mere inch away from the base of his spine. The three girls were making it clear that Zabuza was not to be harmed, in any way, shape, or form. You will not harm Zabuza-sama, shouted the masked girl as she held her needle dangerously close to the gangster's spine. She was protective of the man who had saved her from destitution. The gangster lost control of his bladder at this moment, being so close to death, his body twitched in fear, causing him to drop his sword to the ground. Getu, let me remind you why you listen to me. Genjutsu, Akido no Hime Genjutsu. Screams of guilt, he said as he looked directly at one of Gaidu's henchmen. As soon as he did, the mercenary backed away into a wall. No. I killed you. You can't be here, screamed the man as he continued to back away. He screamed out in a primal manner as he quickly pulled his blade from his side and committed suicide, unleashing his blood as he committed seppuku. Remember, Gaidu, I can make your fears manifest and drive you to kill yourself just like that man there. Coldly, the black-clad man spoke as he leaned back in his seat, looking at the gangster in annoyance. He leaned back in his chair, returning to the shadows, which felt more organic to him than anything. The crime boss nodded his head and moved carefully to get out the door. He didn't like the environment any longer. I had things under control, until Sharkboy's pet shot me full of needles to make me look dead. I was about to, explained the scarred shinobi as he sat up, his face still bleeding some from the dual knee strike. He was suddenly cut off as the masked girl spoke up. Would have ended up dead, is the end of that sentence. If that giant shinobi, with the kanabo, could break one of my ice barriers, he would have crushed you to a pulp. She interjected as she removed her mask, and returned to tending Zabuza's wounds. Haku is correct. Besides, if the girl that kicked your hadn't showed up, I bet the Uchiha would have killed both of us. I heard rumors of him. They say he got his eyes replaced after his inability caused his twin brother to be killed. We're lucky he doesn't use the eyes other than the base version, responded Zabuza as he glared at the shinobi he was essentially forced to work with for the time being. He didn't like being around this man. He made the demon of the mist uncomfortable. No person could enjoy being cut open like Kojiro did, no one. You seem to forget something, Kuroken. I was sent to investigate the Kyuubi brat. Someone wants the Jinchuriki to be stronger than they already are. That, and I don't answer to you, responded Kojiro as he stared at the orange-eyed shinobi as if he were unimpressed. He didn't like him. The way he always stared, it was as if Kuroken was reading the soul. Is that so? He coldly questioned as he stared at the masochist. His gaze was a piercing one. He stood to his feet and stepped towards the insubordinate shinobi and grabbed him by the neck. His hair, obi belt, and robe flowed as he moved swiftly. He slammed the Junin to the wall and glared. His near serene expression was now gone. Let go of me, gasped Kojiro as he clutched Kuroken's arm, trying to get free. He was struggling to breathe. He tightened his grasp on the scarred ninja's throat as he stared him deeply in the eye, the soulless gaze of hell piercing deep inside his soul as he angrily spoke. You will do as I command. The Jinchuriki are not weapons. So tell that puppet that you couldn't get any information on the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. And you will tell that son of a bitch Tetsuoni if he thinks about messing with Ginshin's family any longer, I will come see him myself. As soon as Kojiro nodded his head, the Messiah of Hell released his hold on the shinobi's neck and stepped away, his face returning to the melancholy expression it normally showed. Why do you respect Ginshin so much? You betrayed Konoha and him. The scarred shinobi asked frantically as he gasped for air. Rubbing his neck, he looked to the shinobi of Odogakure in a confused manner. Because he is more of a true shinobi than you and your allies are, or ever will be. You would turn on your own people for what? Power. I don't have to justify myself to you. Now you will continue your duties, and Zabuza, you and your group will continue your job so the Uchiha and his team will not realize there is more going on. Do I make myself clear? He spoke as he stepped towards the door of the building. He turned his head and glanced back calmly. Yeah, fine, muttered the scarred shinobi as he looked back at Kuroken. He truly hated the right hand of that snake Orochimaru. He was a sickening monster. If he had it his way, he would gut him like a fish. Right. As soon as I'm healed, we'll strike the bridge builder and eliminate that team, no problem, remarked the demon of the mist as he stared at the black-haired shinobi. He was doing his best to avoid irritating the legendary Messiah of Hell. anything to avoid those hellish genjutsu that could make even the strongest shinobi tell their secrets. Nodding his head in approval, the black-haired shinobi stepped out of the building, leaving the rest of the ninja to take care of matters for the time being. Meanwhile, Ferrucci and his squad were walking through the village with Tazuna unscathed from the journey, having reached his home at last. When a young dark-haired woman ran out of the house relieved to see Tazuna was safe and sound. "Father, I'm glad you made it back safe and sound," she exclaimed, glad to see her father safe. She then looked at the four ninjas and back at her father and asked, "Are these the shinobi you went to hire?" "Yes. It wasn't a safe journey. Seems Gedo is getting more desperate. But now that I am back, the bridge can be built," he explained as he walked towards the house, which was more like a shack than anything. The whole village was more or less a shanty town, the poverty that was forced onto them by Gedo, as he continued to bleed them dry for his own greed. "Sorry for the inconvenience, Tsunami, but they will be staying here until the bridge is built," Tazuna said as he pulled his pack off his back. As he was about to enter, a young boy just looked at the ninja as if they couldn't do anything. "I don't know why you're here, you won't change anything. Everything will stay the same," he shouted as he pointed at the ninjas in fury. He didn't have faith in them in any way, shape, or form. "Inari, things will change. As soon as we have a bridge, we can freely get supplies again," reasoned Tsunami to her son, trying to keep him from offending the shinobi. "I don't even know why they're bothering. It isn't their fight. They don't have anything to lose. If things don't work, they get to just go home," shouted the boy, not stopping, not feeling any hesitation in his words at all. "Inari, stop. They're here to help us," his mother exclaimed as she looked at her son in a stern manner. Angrily, the boy turned and ran inside, slamming the door behind him as he entered. "Inari!" the dark-haired woman shouted. She turned to look at the Konoha ninja in front of her and bowed respectfully and said, "I'm sorry. Don't hold it against him, he has lost faith. It's understandable. In his eyes, we are no better than Gedo's thugs or Mamochi Zabuza," responded Ferrucci as he looked to the bridge builder's daughter, very thankful that Naruto had kept his cool for the time being. He looked at the house the family lived in. It was better off than most of the village. He then calmly said, "We won't impose on you too much. At most we will be sleeping because come tomorrow, I begin training my squad so they will be prepared. I think Zabuza needs time to lick his wounds. I will remain with Tazuna a majority of the time to protect him." "That's fine. Now come in, it's getting late, we can worry about that stuff tomorrow," Tazuna gruffly said as he walked into his house, motioning for the ninja team to follow him in. The next morning, Ferrucci had brought the three students a grove that was well within the forest to help train the three genin. Each needed to have the space to test their abilities. "Alright, it's time to begin your training. I am certain you each have been taught the art of tree climbing. Naruto, I may need to see if you can do this," the messy-haired Junin said as he looked to the blonde. "Why not?" Naruto responded with a shrug as he ran up the tree, using the art in question, but he sprung off and bounded to another tree and continued to do this until he was hanging upside down from a branch, using his chakra to hold himself in place. He smirked smugly as he held position, his hair and coat dangling behind his head as he said, "Yeah, I can do it. I see you picked up Ginshin's too. But you see his ways are all sizzle no steak," exclaimed Ferrucci as he pulled out a kunai and threw it towards Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened as he stopped sending chakra to his feet, dropping to the branch below, as he used it as way to swing himself forward. A makeshift springboard sent him flying at his teacher as used a head scissor technique. He swung his body one way and sent his teacher crashing into the ground. "All sizzle no steak, huh?" he remarked as he stood up from the ground, dusting himself off. "Naruto, you shouldn't attack Ferrucci-sensei," scolded Seika as she stepped forward, not too pleased with her teammate's behavior. Seika, it's alright, I needed to see how far Naruto progressed. Ginshin was likely to teach Naruto in the way he was taught, explained the Junin as he stood to his feet dusting himself off, a grin on his face almost as if he was proud of Naruto. He reached to his holster, pulling out another kunai. He lunged forward, swinging the kunai he needed to test Naruto's defensive ability and kenjutsu skills now. The blonde reached to his side, gripping the Jien blade and pulling the blade from its scabbard and blocked the strike. He pushed against the kunai as well as he could, managing to push away the first strike. He lost balance as he deflected the blow. Seeing the blonde genin stumble to try and maintain his footing, Furuchi lunged forward and held the kunai to Naruto's neck. You need to maintain your balance, this is the key to kenjutsu. Had this been a true fight, I would have struck you down. You have the potential, but it seems you aren't ready for swords. Your training will be to use the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu or Suchi Bunshin no Jutsu and work on maintaining your balance as you spar against yourself, the Junin coldly said as he stepped away from Naruto. As he stepped away, he threw the kunai and sending it flying towards the other two students. As the dagger flew through the air, it was deflected by a pair of kunai which flew in unison. The dark-haired Junin leapt forward, pulling a kunai from his holster. With a downward slash he knocked both knives out of the air. As he deflected the blades he sighted Seika with a Fuma shuriken. Ranged combat is my specialty. Sorry sensei, but I'm not holding back, she coldly responded as she let the shuriken fly. The blades cut through the air as it picked up momentum from her throw. The blades slowly transformed into a wheel of gray, moving with malicious intent to strike the Junin down where he stood. As expected, but too reckless, he commentated as performed a standing moonsault, transitioning it into a foot stomp, grounding the shuriken. Grinding the ball of his foot against the inner ring of the large shuriken, he popped the weapon into the air. He quickly grabbed hold of the ring and stood ready to throw the weapon back, and with great precision he spun over and sent the larger shuriken flying, lodging it into the tree right behind the girl. Larger weapons like the Fuma shuriken require more skill to use successfully. But you are definitely above average, you just need to work on your throw, since it requires more momentum to take someone down with a large weapon like this. He casually explained as he stepped forward. Rolling his sleeve up, he bit his thumb and spread his blood over a summoning tattoo, summoning forth a black tachi with crimson and black design on the grip. His eyes turned towards Sayuki and with a quick motion he rushed forward and swung the blade. The brunette moved the staff vertically and deflected the strike, and swiftly moved her hands gripping the top. She flipped overhead and brought the staff downward. The black-haired Junin brought his long sword upward and intercepted the blow. Stepping to the side he gripped hold of his blade with both hands and rolled through and brought the blade horizontally. The heiress of the Sarutobi planted her staff to the ground, planting it firmly and stopped the blade once again. You've been studying under Hokage-sama, so it's natural that you would be able to keep up with my tachi. But in a real fight you need to be. He trailed off as he pushed against her staff and rolled through and held the blade to the back of her neck and coolly said, on your toes. Change of plans, Sayuki and Naruto, you will train together. Seika, you will join me in protecting Tazuna. Naruto, you and Sayuki shall work at increasing the speed of your attacks, and the balance of your strikes, until you can attack at a level where the weapons are an extension of your being, like ranged weapons are for Seika. Aren't you going to check our other skills, sensei? Seika asked in a confused manner, not thinking she had enough talent to be of use for the job. I could, but I have enough faith in your ability. I'm going to return. You three can train for now, he commented as he walked away before disappearing with Shunshin no Jutsu. Elsewhere, deep in the forest, Kojiro moved silently in search of his goal. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to find, but apparently it was of importance. He dropped to the ground as he felt a chakra spike. As he dropped to the ground, a claw made of chakra was held to the back of his head. "Boss, nice to see you," he quietly said, trying to make sure not to agitate the man. The figure wore a fur coat akin to the sages of Yamagakure, only difference was his was a cream color, with black and white trim. A black shirt and a sandy brown pair of cargo pants. His green eyes peered out from behind a black and white mask with a pattern resembling the yin-yang. His golden blonde hair falling over the top of the mask. As he coldly stared at the scarred shinobi, he coldly said, "Report. Have you found the boy?" "Yeah. Dunno why you want the kid, but yeah, I found him. Only one problem, he's the student of an Uchiha," spoke the masochist saint as he stood still, being ever careful not to agitate his superior. "Troublesome," remarked the man as he ceased forming his claw. He took hold of his mask and removed it from his face, pulling his hood down. He was actually a handsome man behind the mask, perhaps a bit vain because of it. "Kintama-sama, your father was here. It's the only explanation for my latest medal. That little bitch Agaya was here. Used Ginshin's patented double knee face buster. Forget what the dumb called it," remarked the masochist as he turned to face the man. He hoped to avoid punishment, but perhaps punishment would be his reward. "I see. And what about the tool of the snake?" asked Kintama as he looked ahead to his subordinate. "He wants me to find something the former leaders of the Hake Rengo hid away. The snake seems to think that it might be a weapon or scroll the palace guardians have stowed away," he smugly commented, with hints of boredom to his voice. Stroking his chin, the golden-haired shinobi mused over it before saying smugly, "Oh yes, the treasure bequeathed to the 108 heroes of the Shuan dynasty. HMPH pitiful. Anything else? Oh, and I think the Buddha of Hell has a man crush on the failure," commented the tiger-marked shinobi as he stroked his beard, a smug smirk on his face. "It's natural. Danzo destroyed both their lives. Danzo killed Kuroken's father. Tetsuoni killed Ginshin's mother, my aunt, but she chose her path when she tried to stop us." He spoke with utterly no remorse. He seemed almost satisfied with his chosen road in life. He looked at Kojiro, and with a conceited smirk said, "Go look for whatever bauble it is that the snake wants. He is our host for the time being." "Right," the black-haired shinobi said as he took to the trees once again. The green-eyed shinobi donned his mask once more. Pulling his hood up, he slowly walked into the forest, disappearing into the mist as it swept through the trees. Meanwhile, training continues. Naruto dashed forward and swung the branch sword. The seven-bladed sword collided with the staff of steel and sparks flew. He grinned as he pushed against her steel pole. He hopped back, reaching to his side as he gripped hold of the GN blade. He hesitated for a moment, then unsheathed the blade from its scabbard. He ran towards the brunette, ready to strike with a combination as a kunai hit the ground in front of him. He thrust the swords to the ground and moonsaulted back. As he soared through the air, a kunai flew towards him, which he deflected with a swing of the GN blade. "Forget about me," slyly the white-haired kunoichi commented as she jumped into the air, throwing two shuriken towards the blonde. The shuriken were knocked aside well enough, though lacking precision. She demurely reached up and played with one of her low-hanging pigtails. Naruto saw this, and a vein formed in his forehead. "That arrogant bitch," was the immediate thought that took over. Sheathing his swords, he eyed both girls, realizing they were both on par with him. He clasped his hands, rolling his wrists to loosen the joints. He needed to be ready. Lightly hopping from side to side before he lunged forward, gripping the scabbard of his katana, he pressed his thumb to the tsuba, which looked like a whirlpool. The sword popped loose, allowing him to grip the handle and unsheath it quickly. Seika didn't waste any time and threw kunai and shuriken alike, she smirking as she ran behind the ranged weapons and leapt to the air. She was using this as a smoke screen, that in her alleged specialty being ranged weapons. Naruto swung the katana to knock away the small weapons that were coming his way. He wasn't keeping an eye on her, as one kunai in the wrong place could spell the end for him. One punctured artery and he was dead. As the blonde cleared past the barrage, he didn't see the white-haired girl anywhere to be seen. He looked to the air just as she wrapped her legs around his head and whipped her body, bringing him down to the ground. As he crashed to the ground, Seika rolled off his shoulders into the air, landing to the ground at the same time as the katana planted itself into the ground. I said ranged combat is my specialty, didn't say I can't fight with other techniques, she haughtily commented as she stepped towards the boy, and looked down at him, the folds of her mask indicating a smug smirk. Of course, as this was going on, Sayuki had managed to slip behind the white-haired girl, and hooked her staff about the girl and performed a modified judo throw. As the Hitaki clan heiress fell to the ground, Naruto rolled back and popped to his feet and took the advantage and took her legs, rolling her over to her stomach. Putting his knee to the back of her head, he lifted her legs up and applied a devastating submission hold. And I know ways to dismantle someone, princess. I suggest tapping out, commented the boy as he continued his hold on her legs, applying the deadly hold. What the hell is this? She exclaimed as the boy wrenched in the hold, large amounts of pain shooting through her body as she tried to find a way to get loose. But with a knee on her head and her legs elevated, it was hard to get loose. She tapped the ground, surrendering to the boy. When she did this, Naruto released her legs and stood to his feet, having asserted his dominance over the girl. All right, that will do. Impressive, Naruto, the wolf tamer. I've been on the receiving end of that a few times, not pleasant. That is enough training for today. If you three keep it up, you will kill each other, spoke Ferrucci as he strode past the trees, into the grove. He looked at the ground, noting all the shuriken and kunai. He picked up the katana but immediately felt a shock course through his right arm, causing him to drop the blade. Naruto, who gave you this sword? It seems unusual. Ginshin Tusen, he said his dad wanted me to have them, something about them rejecting him. Kinda weird if you ask me. Naruto responded, oblivious to why the Uchiha asked. It was of no consequence to him, he could use the sword, that was all that really mattered. The dark-clad Junin shrugged the thought away. He didn't think it too important to worry about. Instead, he calmly said, gather your gear up, time to head back. Sunset is approaching. Hours later, Naruto sat on the roof of Tazuna's house. He was holding a pair of knives in his hands. He looked at them, sighing some. He knew he had to give them to Seika since it was a request of his foster father, but he just knew they would start to argue again. He leaned against the roof to look to the starlit sky. He needed an idea. As he looked to the sky, he saw the white-haired girl standing over him, staring at him. She looked at him, then looked to the side quickly. Before taking a seat next to him, she clutched one of her pigtails, silently stroking her hair. She looked as if she were trying to work up the nerve to do something. Naruto, she began feeling almost timid in this moment, trying to find the courage to do this. She turned to look at him, feeling it is only right to look him in the eye when she said this. Yeah? He asked as he looked at her quietly, propping himself up with his elbows, turning to look at her. You were impressive today, that's all. She trailed off as she resumed playing with her hair. She acted almost as if she had a crush on him. It's nothing big, but, here, he managed to say as he sat up and held the two knives out for her. He looked to the side silently since he wasn't too good in these situations. Talking to a girl, alone, and not having to worry about bossy girls. She took the knives, which were wrapped in a cloth. She pulled away the cloth to reveal a set of kodachi-like knives. Each had wolves etched into the blades. Her eyes widened in shock. What are these for? She quietly said as she looked at the knives, then to the boy. Jin Tusen said your family could use that white chakra with a special knife to kinda create a blade of chakra. And he knows how to make weapons, so he made these for me. It was my idea since, I want you to stay safe, he managed to say as he looked away blushing some, since he realized what he was saying was rather mushy. Naruto. Seika said, a touch confused by the sudden change in the boy's behavior. He was actually a nice guy when he wasn't acting like a carbon copy of Ginshin. She smiled behind her mask, finding this side of Naruto to more likable. When he's like this he's kind of cute, she mused as she held knives in her hands. If we're a team we have to look after each other. That all really? He trailed off as he felt a pair of lips on his cheek. He blinked and shifting his gaze to his left to see the white-haired girl kissing his cheek. Seika pulled away and looked at the boy strictly as she said, "This is between you and me, so don't be bragging about it." She then wrapped her arms about the boy and hugged him tightly. Naruto froze a moment. He was caught off guard by this showing of affection by Seika, considering he and she hadn't gotten along very well in the past. He snapped out of the shock and put his arms around her. I'll be honest Naruto, I actually like you, she whispered, her face flush with awkwardness as she rested her head against the blonde's chest. She wanted to enjoy this moment as best as she could. She then looked up as she continued, I mean I really like you. The boy blushed when he heard these words come from her. He never thought she liked him in that way. He couldn't find the ability to speak nor the words to respond to her confession. Don't say anything, I just want to enjoy this moment, she said as she put her fingers to his lips, before resting her head against his chest once again. She just wanted to enjoy a moment between her and Naruto, with no fangirls, no worshippers, no alleged engagements, just her and a nice boy who had won her affections. The next day, Seika had been asked to accompany Ferrucci in his daily duties of protecting the bridge builder. This left Naruto and Sayuki to spar alone. They stood across from each other in the center of the grove. Naruto lightly held the Gien blade in his right hand, and stuck the blade to the ground as he took hold of his sleeveless coat and tossed it to the side. Don't treat me with kid gloves Naruto-kun, come at me with everything you have. Exclaimed the brunette as she cast her denim jacket to the side and undid her ponytail, letting her hair down. Grasping the handle of his sword tightly, the blonde hopped from side to side before lunging forward and going with an upward slash. With a quick response, the brunette brought her staff horizontally, blocking the blade. The blonde spun to his left and brought the straight blade downward, only to have it blocked again. Naruto brought a light kick to her midsection. He didn't stop there. He rolled through, stepped to the ground and spun back, landing a heel kick to the side of Sayuki's head. The girl rolled through the air and landed to the ground, and quickly brought herself to her feet, rubbing the side of her head, staggered from the blow. She managed to regain her bearings. She lunged forward and swung the staff horizontally, colliding the steel pole with the blade of steel. Reaching to the side, Naruto pressed his thumb to the tsuba of the katana, and with an audible grinding the blade came from its holding in the scabbard. He hopped back, avoiding each swing of the staff until the girl grabbed one end and brought the staff across his midsection. The wind left his body as the pole struck his solar plexus. He managed to stay conscious, but he was brought down to the ground with a strike of the pole across his back. We're 1 for 1, but you better step it up. I'm not a frail flower like Sakura or Ino. I became Kunoichi for a reason. So you better come at me with everything. She shouted as she looked at the boy, holding her staff to be ready for anything he could throw at her. Fine. You want more Tsuruheim? I will give you more. He exclaimed as he rolled to his feet. He planted the twin blades to the ground. He rushed forward once again and unsheathed the large branch sword that rested across his back. As he reached the girl, he brought the sword downward, once again having it be blocked, but he moved the barbed sword back and hooked one of its pronged blades against the shaft. He pushed forward and forced her arms up, and proceeded to unload a few kicks on her, striking firmly with the last strike to knock the wind out of her. He saw the opening clearly and tossing his sword to the side as he spun to the left and grabbed hold of the girl by the head, and brought her crashing to the ground, her head held to his shoulder, as he utilized a jumping cutter. Naruto rolled the girl onto her back and looked down at her breathing heavily as he said, "I think we can call this sparring session closed." "Ouch. Who taught you to do a crazy move like that?" asked the girl as she rubbed her neck, feeling quite dizzy from the strike. Unknown to the two, they were being observed by one of Ferrucci's Kage Bunshin to monitor their progress. Having seen the two end their session of training, the Kage Bunshin vanished into a puff of smoke. "I learned Ginshin's unique style of taijutsu. It's like the crazy offspring of gentle fist, strong style, grappling, and street fighting," he commented as he helped her to her feet, but the girl quickly lost her balance and knocked Naruto over in the process. The two fell to the ground with a loud thud, Sayuki's face a mere few inches from Naruto's. The two blushed deeply from this awkward moment. The brunette quickly got to her knees and moved away and exclaimed, so should we try this tomorrow maybe? You know, I mean training. Not the awkward situation with me on top of you." Naruto scratched his cheek, and shyly responded, "Yeah, that would be nice." Meanwhile with Ferrucci and Seika, things were going well, no troubles during the construction of the bridge. Of course a few more workers had quit during the course of the day, primarily fearing for their lives. "Looks like Naruto and Sayuki have shown some remarked improvement just now," commented the Junin. He had received the information from his Kage Bunshin. He looked to Seika, who was keeping an eye out from a perch high up on the bridge. "No telling when Zabuza will show up. Things could get dangerous. I hope all three of them are ready by then. Things will become more dangerous," he quietly thought inwardly as he thought of his students who might be in over their heads. "Looks like we might be done in a week's time. That is if the workers don't keep quitting their jobs," Tazuna said as he sat down near the dark-haired shinobi. He had high expectations for the bridge, and hopefully then things will be better. Zabuza will attack before then. If he's taking orders from Kojiro too, things might be more convoluted than we initially thought, spoke the messy-haired Junin as he turned to look at the village. He knew things were going to become more hectic soon enough. "Well, no need to worry about that now. We should head back, it's starting to get dark," responded the bridge builder as he stood to his feet, and walked down the bridge to head home. "Seika, let's go," exclaimed the Uchiha as he motioned to his students so they could catch up to their client. They needed to stay close to their client to make sure he was safe. Meanwhile at the grove, Sayuki pulled on her jacket and was getting ready to head back. She then said, "We should get back, Naruto-kun, it's getting late. You go on ahead. I want to try a jutsu that was in a scroll Jin Tusen gave me," he responded with a bit of determination in his voice, as he flexed his fingers. "Alright, but don't be too long, okay?" she answered as she walked out of the grove. Naruto dropped into a Jinkitsu clan taijutsu stance with his legs spread and his arms hanging down. His right arm was enveloped in the Raiden chakra. He rushed forward and thrust his fist ahead, striking the tree. A loud crack ripped through the air as a section of the tree was blown away as if a bolt of lightning struck it. He flexed his fingers and looked to the section of the tree, pleased with the results. Seeing the devastation that a punch could do, he saw the merits of Ginshin's combination techniques. He turned to grab his coat and saw a dark-haired girl standing across from him with a basket. "So that's the boy that Kaisui wants to rend," she mused as she walked into the clearing. Haku had dressed as a villager to perchance spy on the shinobi and relay the information to her team. As the boy walked past her, she spoke, "Do you train so hard to protect those you hold dear, or do you do it out of necessity?" Naruto froze as she spoke to him. It was an unusual question. Why would someone who looked like a villager ask a question like that? He turned his head and looked at her. "How would you answer a question like that out of the blue?" "What I mean is, Do you want to save the people you consider special and irreplaceable, or do you want to fight just for acknowledgement? She asked him in a more precise manner. Perhaps she was testing him, or perhaps she was analyzing his weaknesses.